Don't make her go, Daddy, please." The millionaire froze in his mansion doorway, staring at his 6-year-old son, clinging desperately to the black maid he'd never met, calling her the mother he wished he had. What Richard Hale discovered in his kitchen that day would shatter everything he thought he knew about family love and the price of his own ambition. Before we dive in, please subscribe and hit that bell so you never miss our stories of love, hope, and second chances. And comment below with your city. I want to see how far this story travels across the world. Mr. Hale, your son, hasn't smiled in 3 weeks. Those were the words Richard's assistant had texted him in London, but he'd ignored them. Business first, always business first. That's how he'd built his empire. That's how he'd become one of the youngest self-made millionaires in the country. But now, standing in his own kitchen doorway, after 37 days abroad, watching his only child sob into the apron of a woman he'd never seen before, Richard Hale finally understood what he'd been losing while he was busy winning. "Ethan." His voice came out harder than he intended. The little boy's head snapped up, his face red and wet with tears. But instead of running to his father, instead of the joyful reunion Richard had imagined on the plane ride home, Ethan's arms tightened around the young woman's waist. "Daddy, no, don't fire her. Please don't fire her." Richard's briefcase hit the marble floor with a bang that echoed through the cavernous kitchen. "What on earth is going on here?" The woman, she couldn't have been more than 25, turned slowly, her dark eyes wide with fear. Her hands trembled as she gently tried to pry Ethan's fingers from her uniform. "Mr. Hale, I can explain. Where is Mrs. Chen? Where is my son's nanny?" "She quit, sir. 5 weeks ago. I was hired through the agency. Naomi Brooks. I've been taking care of Ethan since—" "Taking care of him?" Richard's voice rose. "He's hysterical. What have you done to my son?" "I haven't done anything to him." Naomi's voice cracked, but there was something fierce underneath the fear. "I've been here for him every single night when he cries himself to sleep, every morning when he wakes up asking why you haven't called, every afternoon when he sits at that window." She pointed to the bay window overlooking the driveway, waiting for a car that never comes. The words hit Richard like physical blows. "Ethan, come here. Now." He held out his hand, fighting to keep his voice steady. "No." Ethan's small body shook. "You're gonna make her leave like you made Mama leave." The kitchen went silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. Richard felt the blood drain from his face. "Ethan, your mother didn't, that wasn't— You're always gone." The little boy's voice broke into a wail that tore through Richard's chest. "Mrs. Chen left because you never came home. Sarah left before that. And now you're going to make Naomi leave too, and she's the only one who— Shh, sweetheart." Naomi dropped to her knees, her own tears spilling over as she cupped Ethan's face. "It's okay. Everything's going to be okay. Promise." Ethan's whisper was desperate. Naomi looked up at Richard, her eyes pleading, terrified, but also defiant. "I promise I'm not going anywhere without saying goodbye. I promise." Richard watched his son collapse into this stranger's arms, watched her rock him gently while humming something soft and low, and felt his entire world tilt on its axis. How long has he been like this? The question came out rough. Naomi looked up at him, still holding Ethan close. "Like what Mr. Hale said, lonely since I got here. Maybe longer. Your housekeeper said the last nanny left because she couldn't handle how much he cried at night." "That's not— I was told she had a family emergency." "Maybe that's what she told the agency." Naomi's voice was soft but unflinching. "But she told your housekeeper the truth before she left. She said she couldn't stand watching a child grieve for a parent who was still alive." Richard's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You have no right." "You're right, I don't." Naomi stood up slowly, keeping one hand on Ethan's shoulder. "I'm just the maid. I make $8 an hour to clean your house and heat up meals your chef prepared. I'm nobody. But your son, her voice caught. Your son told me 3 days ago that he wished I was his mother. And I didn't know what to say, Mr. Hale. I didn't know how to tell a 6-year-old boy that wishes don't work that way. Ethan buried his face in Naomi's side again, his small shoulders shaking. Richard couldn't breathe. The kitchen, his kitchen in his house that he'd paid for with his blood and sweat and endless hours of sacrifice, suddenly felt like foreign territory. I brought you something, Ethan. His voice came out strange and distant. From Germany. A teddy bear. It's in my suitcase. Ethan didn't look up. He has 17 teddy bears, Mr. Hale. Naomi's words were quiet, but they landed like thunder. What he doesn't have is a father. Richard's jaw clenched. You're fired. No. Ethan's scream was primal. No, no, no. Daddy, please, I'll be good. I promise, I'll be good. Just don't make her go. Baby, listen to me. Naomi was crying now too, pulling Ethan back into her arms. I don't want you to go. You sing to me. You read me stories. You stay with me when I'm scared. Ethan. Richard stepped forward but stopped when his son flinched away from him. Actually flinched. From his own father. I'll be good. Ethan sobbed again. I won't ask for her anymore. I won't talk about Mama. I won't cry at night. I promise, Daddy. Just let her stay. Please, please. Richard felt something crack inside his chest, something that had been building pressure for months, maybe years, finally giving way. He'd closed deals worth millions, negotiated with the toughest businessmen in 3 continents, stood firm against hostile takeovers and corporate espionage. But this, his own son begging him with tears streaming down his face, offering to erase parts of himself just to keep a maid he'd known for a month. This was the negotiation Richard Hale had no idea how to win. Mr. Hale. Naomi's voice was thick with emotion. I'll leave quietly. I'll pack my things. Just give me a few minutes to say goodbye to him properly, please. She lifted Ethan's chin gently. Remember what we talked about how love doesn't disappear, even when people aren't in the same room. Ethan nodded, hiccuping through his tears. Your daddy loves you so much. He works hard because he wants to give you everything. I don't want everything. Ethan's voice cracked. I just want him. I just want someone to stay. Richard's vision blurred. When had he last cried? At his wife's funeral, before that. He couldn't remember. But now tears burned behind his eyes as he watched this young woman, this stranger, comfort his son in ways he'd forgotten how to do. Naomi. His voice came out hoarse. She looked up at him, her face streaked with tears, but her spine straight, waiting for him to tell her to leave, expecting it. How long have you been doing this, taking care of children? She blinked, surprised by the question. Since I was 16. I helped raise my younger siblings after my mom got sick. Then I worked at a daycare through college. This is my first private placement. College? You're in college. Was. I had to drop out last semester. My mom's medical bills. She stopped shaking her head. That's not your concern, Mr. Hale. I'll get my things. Wait. The word came out sharper than he intended. Just wait. Richard looked at his son. Really looked at him maybe for the first time in months. The boy had dark circles under his eyes. His cheeks were hollow. When had he lost weight? When had he started looking so small, so fragile, so utterly lost? Ethan. Richard lowered himself to one knee, ignoring the way his expensive suit jacket strained across his shoulders. Can you look at Daddy? Ethan kept his face buried in Naomi's apron. Please, buddy, just look at me for a second. Slowly, painfully, Ethan turned his head. His blue eyes, so much like his mother's, were red and swollen. I'm sorry. The words caught in Richard's throat. "I'm so sorry, son. I thought I was doing the right thing, working hard, building something for our future. But I wasn't paying attention to right now, was I?" Ethan's bottom lip trembled. "And right now is what matters. Right now is when you need me." Richard swallowed hard. "Your mama would be so disappointed in me." "Don't talk about mama." Ethan's voice was small and broken. "It makes you sad, and then you leave." Richard felt like he'd been punched in the gut. "Is that what you think? That talking about mama makes me leave?" Ethan nodded. "Oh, buddy, no, that's not." Richard rubbed his face with both hands, trying to find words that wouldn't fail him. "I left because I didn't know how to be here without her. I didn't know how to be your daddy without being her husband too. And that was wrong. That was so wrong of me." Naomi's hand tightened on Ethan's shoulder, but she stayed silent. "But talking about mama should never make you scared. She was amazing. She was the best person I ever knew. And you," Richard's voice cracked, "you're so much like her. The way you care about people. The way you love with your whole heart. That's all her, Ethan. That's all your mama's magic inside you." Ethan's chin quivered. "Really?" "Really." Richard held out his hand again, slower this time. "And I've been a fool to miss watching that magic grow." This time Ethan didn't flinch, but he didn't move toward his father either. He looked up at Naomi instead, his small hand clutching hers. "It's okay, sweetheart," Naomi whispered. "It's okay to need time." Richard's hand dropped to his side. The rejection stung, but he deserved it. He knew he deserved it. "You're not fired," he said to Naomi, the words coming out before he'd fully thought them through. Her eyes widened. "What? You're not fired. I was wrong. I was—" He looked at the way Ethan held onto her, the way the boy's breathing had started to even out just from her presence. "I was scared. Because I walked into my own home and found my son choosing someone else over me. And that terrified me more than any boardroom I've ever walked into." "Mr. Hale, how much is the agency paying you?" "That's not." "How much?" Naomi's jaw set. $8 an hour plus room and board. "But money isn't why I—" "It's insulting." Richard stood up, his mind already calculating. "You're caring for my son, my only child, the most important person in my world, even if I've done a terrible job of showing that. $8 an hour is criminal. I didn't take this job for 25. The number came out firm. $25 an hour, full benefits, and you're no longer employed by the agency. You work directly for me, for this family." Naomi's mouth fell open. "Mr. Hale, I can't. That's not—" "You can, and it is." Richard pulled out his phone. "I'll have my lawyer draw up the contracts tomorrow. You'll have health insurance, paid time off, and a salary that actually reflects the value of what you're doing." "I don't understand." Naomi's voice shook. 5 minutes ago you were firing me. 5 minutes ago I was an idiot." Richard looked at his son again. 5 minutes ago I was letting my pride destroy what's left of my family. But I'm not too proud to admit when I'm wrong. And I'm not too proud to accept help when my son clearly needs it. Ethan's head slowly lifted from Naomi's side. His eyes were still wet, but there was something else there now. Something fragile and hopeful. "Does that mean Naomi gets to stay?" "Yes." Richard's throat tightened. "She gets to stay. And you won't be mean to her." "I won't be mean to her. I promise." "And you'll stay too. You won't leave again right away." That question hit harder than all the others combined. Richard thought about his calendar, about the meetings scheduled in Tokyo next week, about the merger that needed his attention in Boston, about the endless string of obligations that had consumed his life. "I'll stay," he heard himself say. "I'll stay as long as you need me to." Ethan looked at Naomi again, seeking permission, or reassurance, or something Richard couldn't quite name. Naomi nodded, giving him a small encouraging smile. Then slowly, so slowly, it made Richard's heart ache. Ethan took one step away from Naomi, then another. Then he walked across the kitchen floor and stood in front of his father, looking up with those blue eyes full of hope and fear and desperate longing. "Can I have a hug, Daddy?" Richard dropped to his knees so fast it hurt, pulling his son into his arms and holding on like Ethan might disappear if he let go. The boy felt so small, so fragile, but he wrapped his thin arms around Richard's neck and held on just as tight. "I missed you," Ethan whispered into Richard's shoulder. "I missed you so much." "I missed you too, buddy. I missed you too." Richard pressed his face into his son's hair, breathing in the smell of kid shampoo and something sweet cookies maybe. "I'm sorry I forgot how to show you that." They stayed like that for a long moment, father and son holding on to each other in the middle of a kitchen that suddenly felt less empty than it had in months. When Richard finally opened his eyes, he saw Naomi standing a few feet away, her hands clasped in front of her, tears still streaming down her face, but with a smile breaking through. "Thank you," he mouthed silently to her. She nodded, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand. Ethan pulled back a little, looking at his father's face. "Are you crying, Daddy?" Richard laughed a wet, broken sound. "Yeah, buddy, I guess I am. Mrs. Chen said big boys don't cry." Mrs. Chen was wrong. Richard brushed the tears from his own face, then gently wiped Ethan's cheeks. "Crying just means we have feelings too big to keep inside, and that's okay. That's more than okay." Ethan nodded seriously, then looked back at Naomi. "Did you hear that Daddy says crying is okay?" "I heard, sweetheart." "So you won't be sad that I cried?" "I will never be sad that you cried." Naomi's voice was fierce with emotion. "I'll only be sad if you ever feel like you have to hide your tears from me." Ethan seemed to consider this, then nodded again. He looked back at his father. "Are you really going to stay for real this time?" "For real this time." "What about your work? You always say your work is really, really important." Richard felt the weight of that question, the way it revealed how many times he'd chosen wrong, how many times he'd prioritized the wrong things. "My work is important," he said, slowly, carefully. "But you're more important. You're the most important. And I lost sight of that. I let my work become an excuse to run away from missing Mama, and that wasn't fair to you." "I miss Mama too," Ethan said softly. "Every day." "I know you do, buddy. I know." Richard pulled him close again. "And we should talk about her more. We should remember all the good things. We should keep her alive in here." He tapped Ethan's chest gently, "by sharing our memories. Naomi says Mama is watching over me from heaven." Richard's eyes met Naomi's over Ethan's head. She looked worried, like maybe she'd overstepped, but Richard just smiled. "Naomi's right. She absolutely is. And I think," his voice caught, "I think she's probably pretty happy that you found someone who takes such good care of you while Daddy was learning how to do better." Ethan pulled back again, his small face serious. "You promise you're learning? You promise you won't forget again?" "I promise I'm trying. And if I start to forget, you have my permission to remind me. Deal?" "Deal." Ethan stuck out his small hand solemnly. Richard shook it, fighting back a fresh wave of tears. When had his son learned to shake hands like a little businessman? When had he missed that Mr. Hale? Naomi's voice was soft. "If you don't mind me asking." Ethan missed dinner. I was about to make him some scrambled eggs and toast. Would you like to stay and eat with him?" It was such a simple question, such a normal, everyday thing. But Richard couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten dinner with his son. Really sat down and eaten together, not just grabbing something quick before rushing to another meeting. "I'd love that." He looked down at Ethan. "What do you say, buddy? Want to have dinner with your old man?" Ethan's face lit up, actually lit up in a way Richard hadn't seen in so long, he'd almost forgotten what his son's real smile looked like. Can we have the special eggs, the ones Naomi makes with cheese and those little green things? Chives, Naomi supplied, already moving toward the refrigerator. And yes, we can definitely have the special eggs. Daddy, you're gonna love them. Ethan grabbed Richard's hand, tugging him toward the kitchen table. They're the best eggs ever. And Naomi cuts the toast into triangles. And sometimes, if I eat all my vegetables at lunch, she puts a little bit of jam on them. Richard let himself be pulled to the table, watching his son transform from the sobbing, desperate child of 10 minutes ago into this animated, chattering little boy. This was who Ethan was supposed to be. This was the child Richard had been missing while he was busy conquering the world. Here, Daddy, you sit here. Ethan patted the chair at the head of the table. That's your spot. And I sit here. He climbed into the chair beside it. And Naomi sits there. He pointed to the chair on his other side. Richard settled into his assigned seat, and something about it felt both foreign and achingly familiar. How many meals had he missed at this table? How many mornings had he left before breakfast? How many nights had he come home after dinner? Naomi moved around the kitchen with quiet efficiency, cracking eggs into a bowl, heating a pan, pulling bread from the fancy bread box Richard had bought but never actually used. She moved like she belonged there, like this kitchen was hers, and Richard realized with a start that maybe it was. Maybe she'd earned the right to feel at home here more than he had lately. Naomi makes breakfast for dinner a lot, Ethan informed him seriously. 'Cause she says breakfast food is happy food, and we should have happy food whenever we need it. Is that so? Richard watched Naomi's shoulders tense slightly at his words. Yeah, and she's teaching me to crack eggs without getting shells in them. I'm getting really good. Want to see? Before Richard could answer, Ethan had scrambled out of his chair and run to Naomi's side. She handed him an egg without hesitation, guiding his small hands gently. Remember, tap it firmly once in the middle. Like this. Ethan tapped the egg against the bowl's edge. Perfect. Now use your thumbs to pull it apart right at the crack. Richard watched his son's face scrunch up in concentration. Watched the way Naomi's hands hovered near his without taking over, letting him do it himself, but ready to help if needed. The egg cracked open cleanly, and Ethan's whoop of joy echoed through the kitchen. I did it. Daddy, did you see? No shells. I saw Buddy. That was perfect. Ethan beamed, then looked up at Naomi. Can I do another one? One more, then. You need to go wash your hands before dinner. Okay. Ethan carefully cracked another egg, and even though a tiny piece of shell fell in this time, Naomi just showed him how to fish it out with half of the shell, turning it into a lesson instead of a failure. Richard couldn't look away. This was what he'd been missing. Not just moments with his son, but the chance to watch Ethan learn and grow and become his own person. The chance to see who was teaching him, shaping him, loving him in the hours when Richard was 30,000 feet in the air, or locked in conference rooms on the other side of the world. Ethan ran off to wash his hands, and Naomi turned back to the stove, whisking the eggs with quick, practiced movements. You're good with him, Richard said quietly. Her hand paused for just a second before continuing. He's a good kid. He is. But that's not what I meant. Richard leaned back in his chair, studying her. You know how to let him fail just enough to learn, but not so much that he gives up. That's not something you can fake. Naomi poured the eggs into the hot pan, the sizzle filling the momentary silence. My little brother has ADHD. My sister has anxiety. I learned early that kids need to feel capable of things, not just protected from everything. Ethan, she stirred the eggs gently. Ethan has been protected from everything except the one thing he actually needed protection from, which is being alone. She looked at him over her shoulder, her dark eyes direct and unflinching. You can have 50 people in this house, Mr. Hale, and a child can still feel completely alone if none of them really see him. The truth of it settled over Richard like a weight. You're right. I know I am. I've been watching it for a month. She turned back to the eggs. Every night, he asks me 3 questions before bed. The same 3 questions every single night. Want to know what they are?" Richard wasn't sure he could handle it, but he nodded anyway. "Did I make Daddy leave? Is he coming back? And will you still be here in the morning?" Naomi's voice was thick with emotion. "Every night, Mr. Hale. Every single night. And I tell him the truth, that he didn't make you leave, that his daddy loves him very much, and that I'll be here as long as I can be. But that last one—" She swallowed hard. "I never knew if I was lying or not. Because I'm just the help, and the help is always temporary." Richard opened his mouth to respond, but Ethan came bounding back into the kitchen, his hands still dripping wet. "I washed extra good." He held them up for inspection. "See? I see, sweetheart." Naomi smiled at him, that same fierce, protective smile. "Now dry them on the towel, please." Richard watched the easy exchange between them, the comfortable rhythm they'd developed. A month. They'd only known each other for a month. But grief and loneliness could forge connections faster than years of casual interaction ever could. Naomi plated the eggs fluffy and golden, and dotted with chives just like Ethan had described. She arranged the toast triangles carefully on each plate, and Richard noticed she'd put a tiny dot of raspberry jam on the corner of Ethan's plate. A reward maybe for eating his vegetables at lunch last week. She set the plates down, one in front of Ethan, one in front of Richard, then started to step away. "Wait." Richard gestured to the empty chair. "You need to eat too." "Oh, I'll just eat in the—" "Please." The word came out softer than he intended. "Ethan put you in a specific seat. I think we should respect the seating chart." Naomi hesitated, then slowly moved to make herself a plate and join them at the table. She sat down gingerly, like she was still waiting for the trap, waiting for Richard to change his mind and remember that she was just the help after all. But Richard just picked up his fork and took a bite of eggs. They were just like Ethan had promised, the best eggs he'd ever had. Not because of any special technique or expensive ingredients, but because he was eating them here in this moment with his son's excited chatter filling the air and the knowledge that someone had been caring for that child, even when Richard himself had failed to. "These are amazing," he said honestly. Naomi's eyes widened slightly. "Thank you." "No." Richard set down his fork. "Thank you. For everything. For being here. For seeing what my son needed when I was too blind to look. For loving him, even though I didn't give you any reason to." Her chin trembled. "Mr. Hale, I don't need a reason to love a child. That's just what you do." "Not everyone does." Richard thought about the 3 nannies before her, all of whom had left. All of whom had failed to connect with Ethan the way this young woman had in just 30 days. Not everyone can. "Daddy." Ethan's voice was small. "Are you really gonna stay? Like sleep here tonight and be here when I wake up?" "Yes, buddy, I promise." "And tomorrow? Will you be here tomorrow?" Richard thought about his schedule again, about all the things that would need to be canceled, all the people who would be disappointed. But then he looked at his son's face, hopeful and scared in equal measure, and knew there was only one answer. "I'll be here tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that." He reached across the table and squeezed Ethan's hand. "I'm going to be here so much you're probably going to get sick of me." Ethan's laugh was watery but real. "I won't get sick of you, Daddy. I promise." They finished dinner in a mixture of comfortable silence and Ethan's ongoing commentary about everything and nothing. His favorite dinosaur, the game he was playing on his tablet, the new book Naomi had been reading to him about a mouse who wanted to be a knight. Richard listened to every word, soaking it in, trying to memorize the sound of his son's voice, the way his face lit up when he talked about things he loved, the unconscious way he'd reach over and touch Naomi's arm when he wanted her attention. When the plates were empty, Ethan yawned hugely, his whole body curling forward. "Someone's tired," Naomi said gently. "Am not tired." But even as Ethan protested, his eyes were drooping. "Bath time, buddy," Richard said, standing up. "Then bed." Ethan looked between his father and Naomi, anxiety flickering across his face. "We can all go up together," Naomi suggested, carefully reading the situation. "Your daddy can run your bath while I lay out your pajamas, and we'll both make sure you get tucked in nice and cozy. How does that sound?" Ethan nodded, relief washing over his small features. As Richard followed his son and Naomi up the grand staircase toward the bedrooms, he realized he was about to face another test. Another moment where Ethan would see if his father really meant what he said, if Richard really planned to stay to be present, to do the work of actually being a parent instead of just bankrolling one. He couldn't fail. Not again. Not when he'd finally gotten a glimpse of what he'd been missing, what his absence had cost them both. This was his second chance, and Richard Hale didn't plan to waste it. Ethan's bathroom was exactly the way Richard remembered leaving it 2 months ago. Rubber ducks lined up on the edge of the tub, a stack of colorful towels on the shelf, the nightlight shaped like a smiling moon plugged in by the sink. But when Richard turned on the water and reached for the bubble bath, Ethan's small voice stopped him. "Not that one, Daddy, the purple bottle." Richard looked at the unfamiliar lavender-scented bottle sitting next to his usual brand. "When did we get this?" "Naomi got it. The other one made my skin itchy." Ethan climbed onto the step stool to watch the water fill. "She noticed I was scratching a lot." Richard felt another stab of guilt. His son had been uncomfortable for who knows how long, and Richard hadn't even noticed. He poured the lavender bubble bath into the water, watching it foam up. "Naomi," he called toward the bedroom where she was gathering pajamas. "Thank you for paying attention." She appeared in the doorway, Ethan's dinosaur pajamas folded over her arm. He tried to hide it, didn't want anyone to think he was complaining. Her eyes met Richard's with pointed meaning. He's gotten very good at hiding things that hurt. Ethan was already pulling off his shirt, oblivious to the adult conversation happening over his head. "Can I bring my boats in?" "Of course, buddy." Richard helped him out of the rest of his clothes, trying not to notice how his ribs were more visible than they should be. "Have you been eating okay?" "Uh-huh." Ethan climbed into the tub, immediately reaching for the plastic boats lined up on the shelf. "Naomi makes really good food. Way better than Mrs. Chen." "Mrs. Chen ordered takeout most nights," Naomi said quietly from the doorway. Ethan wasn't eating much of it. He said everything tasted like cardboard. "Because I was sad," Ethan explained matter-of-factly, making his blue boat crash into his red boat. "Food doesn't taste good when you're sad. But then Naomi came, and she makes food that tastes like hugs." Richard's throat tightened. Food that tastes like hugs. You know, like when someone hugs you and you feel all warm and safe. That's how Naomi's mac and cheese tastes. And her chicken noodle soup. And her chocolate chip cookies. "He helped me make those cookies." Naomi added a small smile, touching her lips. "Got flour everywhere, on the ceiling somehow." "It was an accident," Ethan protested, but he was grinning. "The mixer was too fast." Richard listened to them, watched the easy way they communicated, and felt like an outsider in his own son's life. But instead of getting defensive this time, he sat down on the bath mat and picked up a washcloth. "Can I help you wash your hair, buddy?" Ethan looked surprised, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but you have to be careful not to get soap in my eyes. Naomi knows exactly how to do it." "Then maybe Naomi can teach me." Naomi hesitated, then moved into the bathroom, kneeling beside the tub across from Richard. "Here, cup your hand over his forehead like this," she demonstrated, "and tilt his head back gently. The water runs away from his face that way." Richard copied her movements, his large hand looking awkward next to her graceful one. But Ethan closed his eyes, trustingly leaning back. "That's good, Mr. Hale. Now just pour the water slowly." They worked together, Naomi guiding Richard through the steps of bathing his own son, teaching him things he should have already known. It should have been humiliating. It should have made him angry. Instead, Richard felt grateful. Grateful that someone cared enough about Ethan to do it right, to make him feel safe and loved, even when his father had been too absent to manage it. "All done." Naomi reached for a towel. Ready to get out, sweetheart? Can Daddy dry me? Ethan asked, water dripping from his hair into his eyes. Richard's breath caught. Yeah, buddy. I can do that. He wrapped Ethan in the soft towel, lifted him out of the tub, and carried him into the bedroom. Ethan felt solid in his arms, but still so small, still so much a little boy, even though Richard had somehow started thinking of him as older, more independent, less needy than he actually was. I can get dressed by myself, Ethan announced once Richard set him down. I'm 6 now. That's big. You are big, Naomi agreed, handing him his pajamas. But it's okay to want help sometimes, too. Being big doesn't mean being alone. Ethan considered this while pulling on his pajama bottoms. Is that why Daddy's staying? Because he doesn't want to be alone? The question landed like a bomb in the quiet bedroom. Richard exchanged a look with Naomi, then crouched down to Ethan's level. I'm staying because I don't want you to be alone. And because I've been alone too much, and it didn't make me happy. It made me forget what was important. Me. Ethan's voice was small. I'm what's important. You're the most important thing in the whole world, Ethan. The absolute most important. Richard helped him pull his pajama shirt over his head. And I'm sorry I forgot that for a while. Ethan threw his arms around Richard's neck suddenly fiercely. I won't let you forget again. I promise. Richard held him tight, his eyes burning. Over Ethan's shoulder, he saw Naomi wipe away tears. All right, she said, her voice thick, teeth brushing time, and then we need to pick out a story. Ethan pulled away and ran to the bathroom. Richard could hear him singing to himself while brushing his teeth some made-up song about dinosaurs and spaceships. He does that every night, Naomi said softly. Makes up songs. He's got quite an imagination. Amanda used to do that. Make up songs. Richard stood, his knees cracking. I'd forgotten that about her. How she'd sing about whatever she was doing. Making breakfast, folding laundry, giving Ethan his bath. He remembers her, Naomi said. Not everything, but little things. The way she smelled. How she'd kiss his forehead 3 times before bed. The lullaby she used to sing. She paused. He asked me to learn it. So I did. Richard stared at her. You learned my wife's lullaby. He needed it. He was having nightmares, and that song was the only thing that calmed him down. Naomi's chin lifted slightly. I know I'm not his mother, Mr. Hale. I would never try to replace her. But he needed something, and I could give him that, so I did. What was the song? Hush, little baby. But she changed the words. Made them about a brave knight going on adventures, always coming home safe. Richard remembered. God, he remembered Amanda singing, that her voice soft and sure, promising Ethan that no matter how scary the world got, he'd always be safe, always be loved. I can't believe you learned it. I can sing it for you sometime if you want, so you can remember too. Ethan bounded back into the room, his teeth brushed and his face still damp from washing. Story time. Can we read the dragon book? We read that last night, sweetheart, Naomi reminded him gently. I know, but it's the best one, and Daddy hasn't heard it yet. Ethan was already pulling a picture book from his shelf. It's about a dragon who's scared of everything, but then he makes a friend and gets brave. Richard settled onto Ethan's bed, his back against the headboard. Sounds like a good story. It is. Come sit, Daddy. You sit here. Ethan patted the middle of the bed. And Naomi sits here. He patted the other side. And I sit in the middle so I can see the pictures. It was clearly their routine established over the past month. Richard slid over to make room, and Naomi hesitated only a moment before sitting on the other side of the bed. Ethan climbed between them, snuggling under his blankets, with the book clutched to his chest. Okay, ready. Ready. Richard confirmed. Ethan opened the book, and started reading his small voice, carefully sounding out the harder words. Richard realized with a start that his reading had improved dramatically. The last time they'd read together months ago, now Ethan had still been struggling with simple sentences. "You've gotten really good at reading, buddy." "Naomi and I read every night," Ethan said proudly. "2 books before bed. Sometimes 3 if I'm really good." "He's always really good," Naomi said, ruffling his damp hair. "He just likes to negotiate for more stories." They made their way through the dragon book with Ethan providing commentary on every page about why the dragon was scared and how he felt better after meeting the rabbit who became his friend. By the time they reached the end, Ethan's eyelids were drooping. "One more?" he asked hopefully. "Not tonight, sweetheart." Naomi took the book gently and set it on the nightstand. "You're already falling asleep." "But Daddy's here. I want to stay awake so Daddy doesn't leave." The words stabbed into Richard's chest. "I'm not leaving, Ethan. I'll be here all night, right down the hall in my room. Promise. Promise." But Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "That's what you said last time, and the time before that. And then I woke up and you were gone, and Mrs. Chen said you had to go to work and you'd be back soon, but you weren't back for weeks and weeks and—" "Shh, baby, it's okay." Naomi pulled him close, but Ethan was spiraling now, his breath coming in gasps. "I tried so hard to be good. I didn't cry when you left. I ate all my vegetables. I did my reading. But you still didn't come home, and I thought maybe if I was better." "No." Richard moved closer, his hands shaking as he touched Ethan's shoulder. "No, buddy, this wasn't about you being good. You were perfect. You are perfect. This was about me being a coward." Ethan looked up at him through tears. "You're not a coward. You're the bravest person I know." "Then I lied to you about that too." Richard's voice cracked. "Because brave people don't run away from the people they love. Brave people stay even when it's hard, even when it hurts. And I ran, Ethan. I ran from this house and from you because being here without your mama hurt too much, and I didn't know how to handle that pain." "Does it still hurt?" "Yes, it probably always will a little bit, but you know what hurts worse? Missing you. Missing your childhood. Missing the chance to be your daddy every single day." Richard wiped away Ethan's tears with his thumbs. "And I'm not going to make that mistake anymore." "But what if you forget? What if you wake up tomorrow and remember you have important work, and you have to leave?" Richard looked at Naomi helplessly. She put her hand over his, a brief gesture of support. "How about this?" she said gently. "How about your daddy sleeps in here tonight, right here in your room, where you can see him? Would that help?" Ethan's eyes widened. "In my room? Really?" "If that's okay with you," Richard said quickly, "I can sleep in that armchair over there, or on the floor, or in my bed." Ethan bounced slightly, like when I was really little and had bad dreams. "You can sleep right here, and then I'll know you're really, really here." Richard's back was going to hate him in the morning, but the hope on his son's face made it impossible to say no. "Okay, buddy, I'll stay right here." Naomi stood up. "I'll get you some extra pillows and a blanket, Mr. Hale." "Wait." Ethan grabbed her hand. "You have to do the questions first. We always do the questions." Naomi's face went carefully neutral. "Sweetheart, your daddy's here tonight. Maybe we can skip." "No. He needs to hear them. He needs to know the answers." Ethan looked at Richard. "Every night, Naomi asks me 3 questions, and I have to tell the truth. It's the rules." Richard remembered what Naomi had told him at dinner, the same 3 questions every night. "What are the questions, buddy?" Ethan took a deep breath. "Did I make Daddy leave?" The words hung in the air like smoke. "No," Richard said immediately. "Absolutely not. Nothing you did or didn't do made me leave. That was all my choice, and it was the wrong choice." "Will Daddy come back?" "I'm already back, and I'm staying." Will you still be here in the morning? Richard looked into his son's eyes. I will be right here in this bed when you wake up tomorrow. I swear it. Ethan nodded satisfied, then looked at Naomi. See? Now he knows the rules. Naomi's eyes were bright with tears. Now he knows the rules, she echoed softly. She left to get the bedding, and Ethan immediately curled into Richard's side. Daddy. Yeah, buddy. I'm really glad you came home. Richard kissed the top of his head. Me too, Ethan. Me too. When Naomi returned with pillows and a blanket, she also brought Richard's suitcase from downstairs. I thought you might want to change into something more comfortable than your suit. Thank you. He took the suitcase. Naomi, It's late. She cut him off gently. We can talk tomorrow. Tonight is about him. She nodded toward Ethan, who was already half asleep. Get some rest, Mr. Hale. She moved to leave, but Richard called after her. Naomi. She turned back. The 3 questions. Do you ask them every night, or does he? He asks them. Every single night without fail. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I just answer as honestly as I can. After she left, Richard changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt from his suitcase, then climbed carefully into Ethan's bed. His son immediately snuggled against him, one small hand clutching Richard's shirt. Daddy, I'm here. Can you tell me about Mama? About when you fell in love with her? Richard's breath caught. He'd avoided this conversation for so long, afraid that talking about Amanda would make the pain unbearable. But lying here in the dark, with his son's warm weight against his side, he realized Naomi had been right. Talking about Amanda shouldn't be something that drove him away. It should be something that kept them connected. Your mama, he began slowly, was the worst waitress I ever met. Ethan giggled. Really? Really? I walked into this little cafe near my office and she brought me coffee and promptly spilled it all over my laptop. What did you do? I was furious at first. That laptop had my whole presentation for a big meeting. But then she looked at me with these huge eyes, blue eyes just like yours, and she said, well, now you have an excuse to skip the meeting and have breakfast with me instead. And did you? I did. I skipped the most important meeting of my career up to that point, and I had breakfast with your mama, and then lunch, and then dinner, and by the end of that day I knew I was going to marry her. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Do you think she would be mad at you for leaving me? The question hurt, but Richard answered honestly. Yeah, buddy. I think she'd be pretty mad. She'd probably tell me I was being an idiot and wasting time on things that don't matter. Naomi says Mama would be proud of me. Is that true? That's so true. You're brave and kind and smart just like she was. She'd be incredibly proud of you. Even when I cry. Especially when you cry. Because crying means you're brave enough to feel things, and your mama always said the bravest people are the ones who aren't afraid of their own feelings. Ethan yawned hugely. I like talking about Mama with you. We'll do it more, I promise. Anytime you want to know something about her, you just ask. Kay, love you, Daddy. Love you too, buddy. Within minutes, Ethan was asleep, his breathing deep and even. Richard lay awake in the dark, his son pressed against his side, and tried to remember the last time he'd felt this peaceful. Not happy exactly, there was too much regret for that, but peaceful. Like maybe he'd finally stopped running long enough to realize what he'd been running from. A soft knock on the door made him turn his head. Naomi stood in the doorway, backlit by the hall light. I'm sorry, she whispered. I just wanted to make sure everything was okay. It's fine. He's asleep. Richard carefully extracted his arm from under Ethan and slipped out of bed, moving to the doorway so they could talk without waking the boy. You didn't have to check on us. I always check on him before I go to bed. Old habits. She wrapped her arms around herself. He used to have nightmares, bad ones. I wanted to make sure tonight didn't trigger anything. How bad were the nightmares? Naomi's face was shadowed, but he could hear the emotion in her voice. Bad enough that I started sleeping on the floor in here for the first 2 weeks. He'd wake up screaming for his mother, and then when he remembered she was gone, he'd cry for you. And when I told him you weren't home yet, he'd just break, like his whole world was ending over and over again every night. Richard felt sick. Why didn't anyone tell me? Mrs. Chen tried. She called your assistant 4 times. Your assistant said you were in important meetings. Jesus. Richard leaned against the doorframe. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it was that bad. I believe you. But Mr. Hale not knowing doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't give him back those nights when he needed you. I know that. Believe me, I know that. He ran a hand through his hair. How did you get the nightmares to stop? Routine. Consistency, making him feel safe enough to trust that I'd be there every morning like I promised. She paused. And the song, your wife's song. That helped the most. Will you teach it to me? Naomi looked surprised. You want to learn it? If he needs it again, I want to be able to give it to him, the way you did. She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, tomorrow. After breakfast. Thank you. Richard glanced back at his sleeping son. For everything, I mean it. You saved him, Naomi. You saved my son when I didn't even know he needed saving. He's a good kid. He deserved to be saved. You could have just done your job. Cleaned the house, made the meals, kept him alive. But you gave him more than that. You gave him love when he desperately needed it. Richard's voice roughened. Why? You said you make $8 an hour. That's not enough money to explain the kind of care you've given him. Naomi's eyes flashed. You think I did this for money? No, that's my point. You did this because you care. And I need to understand why so I can... He stopped, unsure how to finish. So, you can... What? Make sure I'm not some kind of threat. Some woman trying to take advantage of a vulnerable child and his rich father. No. So I can make sure you stay. The words came out raw and honest. Because I just spent the last 3 hours watching my son with you, and I finally understand what he's been trying to tell everyone. You're not just the maid, Naomi. I'm the maid, Mr. Hale. Her voice was firm, but not unkind. I clean your house and take care of your son because that's my job. The fact that I care about him doesn't change what I am in this house. Then let's change what you are. She took a step back. What? I meant what I said at dinner. $25 an hour, full benefits, direct employment. But more than that. Richard lowered his voice. I want you to be part of this family, not as the help, as someone who matters. Someone who has a say in decisions about Ethan's care. Someone who... Stop. Naomi held up her hand. Just stop. You can't say things like that. Why not? Because you're his father and I'm just... You're not just anything. Richard realized he'd raised his voice and quickly lowered it again. You're the person who saw my son's pain when everyone else either didn't notice or didn't care. You're the person who held him while he cried at night. You're the person who learned his dead mother's lullaby because that's what he needed to feel safe. Don't diminish that. Tears spilled down Naomi's cheeks. You don't understand what you're offering. Then explain it to me. I'm 24 years old, Mr. Hale. I dropped out of college to help pay my mom's medical bills. I live in your house because I can't afford my own place. I wear secondhand clothes and I've got $40,000 in debt hanging over my head. Her voice shook. You're offering me a place in your family, but we both know how this goes. The second I step out of line, the second I do something you don't like, I lose everything. This job, this room, this connection with Ethan, all of it disappears because you have all the power and I have none. Richard stared at her, understanding hitting him like a freight train. You think I'd use that against you? I think rich men always use their power against people who have none. Maybe not intentionally, maybe not maliciously, but they do it all the same. I'm not... Richard stopped himself. How could he promise he wasn't like that when he'd already proven he was capable of putting his own needs above everyone else's? When he'd already shown he could walk away from his own child without looking back. I want to do better, he said finally. I want to be better. Not just for Ethan, but for you too. You've earned that. You've earned stability and respect, and the knowledge that your place here isn't conditional on pleasing me. Everyone's place is conditional on something. Then let's make it conditional on what's best for Ethan. Not what's easiest for me. Not what makes you most comfortable, but what actually helps that little boy in there grow up healthy and happy and secure. Richard met her eyes. Can we at least try that? Naomi wiped her face. What happens when you get scared again? What happens the next time being here hurts too much and you need to run? I don't run. Not anymore. And if I'm tempted to, I need you to call me on it. I need you to be honest with me, even when it's hard to hear. Especially when it's hard to hear. You're asking me to challenge you, to question your decisions. I'm asking you to help me be the father Ethan deserves, because clearly I don't know how to do that on my own. Naomi looked past him to where Ethan slept peacefully in his bed. He's the only reason I'm still here, you know. I was going to quit. I had my resignation letter written and everything. Richard's stomach dropped. When? Today. I was going to give it to your assistant this afternoon. She laughed bitterly. I couldn't handle watching him wait for you anymore, watching him ask every single day if this would be the day you came home, breaking his heart over and over again while I just had to stand there and tell him you loved him, even though you never called, never visited, never gave him any reason to believe I was telling the truth. But you didn't quit. I couldn't, because what would happen to him if I left too? He'd already lost his mother, lost his father to grief and workaholism, lost 3 nannies in 6 months. If I walked away? She shook her head. I couldn't do that to him, no matter how much it hurt to stay. Richard felt the weight of that sacrifice settle over him. You stayed even though it was killing you. For my son. I stayed because someone had to love him. Someone had to be there to catch him when he fell apart. And if it couldn't be you, then it had to be me. The accusation in those words was clear, and Richard didn't try to deflect it. He deserved every bit of her anger, her judgment, her disappointment. I can't undo the past month, he said quietly. I can't give you back those nights when you slept on his floor because he was too scared to be alone. I can't erase the tears or the nightmares or the 3 questions he asks every night because he doesn't trust that the adults in his life will stay. But I can promise you this from now on, you're not alone in this. From now on, when Ethan needs someone, he'll have both of us. And when you need support, you'll have it too. No more carrying this burden by yourself. Naomi studied him in the dim light. You really mean that? I really mean that. I don't know if I can trust you yet. I know. And that's fair. I haven't earned your trust. Richard glanced back at Ethan one more time. But I'm going to try, starting tomorrow. Starting with learning that lullaby and making breakfast and showing up for every moment of my son's life that I possibly can. And when work calls, when some big emergency comes up and they need you in New York or London or Tokyo, then I figure out how to handle it from here. Or I bring Ethan with me. Or Richard stopped really thinking about it for the first time. Or I say no, because there's always going to be another deal, another meeting, another opportunity. But there's only one Ethan. And I've already missed too much. Naomi's expression softened slightly. He really loves you, you know. Even after everything he loves you so much, it hurts to watch. I don't deserve that. No, Naomi agreed. But that's the thing about kids. They don't love you because you deserve it. They love you because they're wired to believe their parents are everything. And when you fail them, they think it must be their fault somehow. They think if they were just better, smarter, quieter, more obedient, then you'd stay. That's what he meant when he said he tried so hard to be good. He's been trying to earn your love, Mr. Hale, even though it should be unconditional, even though you should give it freely whether he's good or bad or somewhere in between. She wrapped her arms tighter around herself. He shouldn't have to audition to be your son. Richard felt tears prick his eyes. You're right. About all of it. And I'm going to fix this. I swear to God, Naomi, I'm going to fix this. Good. She turned to go, then paused. Mr. Hale. The offer you made at dinner. The salary increase, the benefits, the job security. Did you mean that too? Every word. Then I'll stay. Not because of the money, though, honestly, that's going to change my life, but because I think maybe, just maybe, you actually want to do better. And Ethan deserves a father who wants to try. She looked at him steadily. But if you disappoint him again, if you break his heart one more time, I will make sure he has someone in his corner who puts him first. Even if that means standing up to you. I wouldn't expect anything less. Richard managed a small smile. Thank you, Naomi, for everything. And for agreeing to stay. She nodded once and disappeared down the hallway, leaving Richard alone in the darkened doorway. He slipped back into Ethan's bed, careful not to wake him. His son immediately curled back into his side, seeking warmth and comfort, even in sleep. Richard lay awake for a long time, listening to Ethan breathe, feeling the steady rhythm of his small heartbeat, where their bodies touched. This was what he'd been missing. Not business triumphs or successful deals or the respect of his peers. This. The simple miracle of his child sleeping peacefully beside him, trusting that tomorrow would be better than yesterday. He had no idea how to be the father Ethan needed, no roadmap for healing the damage he'd caused. But for the first time in months, Richard Hale wanted to try. Really try. Not just for Ethan's sake, but for his own. Because somewhere in the chaos of this evening, watching his son fall apart and piece himself back together, Richard had realized something crucial: he'd been surviving, not living. Going through the motions of existence without actually engaging with the messy, beautiful, complicated reality of being human. Naomi had shown him that. A 24-year-old woman making $8 an hour had taught him what his millions never could, that love isn't something you build or earn or achieve. It's something you give freely and completely, even when it costs you everything. Especially when it costs you everything. As Richard finally drifted off to sleep, Ethan's small hand still clutching his shirt, he made himself a promise. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow would be the first day of actually showing up, not just physically, but emotionally. Tomorrow would be the beginning of learning how to be a father, instead of just playing one. And maybe if he was very lucky, Naomi would teach him how. Richard woke to small fingers poking his cheek and the smell of pancakes drifting up from downstairs. "Daddy! Daddy, you're still here?" Ethan's voice was filled with such pure wonder that Richard's chest ached. He opened his eyes to find his son's face inches from his own, those blue eyes wide and disbelieving. "I'm still here, buddy." Richard's back screamed in protest as he sat up. Sleeping in a 6-year-old's bed was not kind to a 42-year-old's spine. "Just like I promised. You really stayed all night." Ethan threw himself at Richard, wrapping his arms around his neck so tight Richard could barely breathe. "I thought maybe I dreamed it. I thought maybe I'd wake up and you'd be gone again." "Not gone. Right here." Richard hugged him back just as fiercely. "What time is it?" "I don't know. But Naomi's making breakfast and it smells really good. And can we go eat now, please?" Richard glanced at the window. The sun was barely up the sky, still that pale gray pink of early morning. "What time do you usually wake up?" "When Naomi wakes me up. But I heard her in the kitchen, and I wanted to see if you were real." "I'm real." Richard tickled Ethan's side gently, earning a giggle. "See, real daddies can tickle." Ethan squirmed away laughing. Come on, I want to show you the pancake trick. The pancake trick. Naomi lets me help flip them. But you have to be really careful or they fall on the floor. Ethan was already pulling on Richard's hand, tugging him toward the door. Hurry! They made their way downstairs, Ethan practically bouncing with excitement. In the kitchen, Naomi stood at the stove, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing jeans and a simple blue sweater instead of her usual uniform. Good morning, she said, glancing over her shoulder. I didn't expect you both up this early. Someone was very excited to make sure I hadn't disappeared in the night, Richard said. Naomi's expression softened. Did you sleep okay? My back may never forgive me, but yeah, better than I have in months actually. Naomi, can I do the flip now? Can Daddy watch? Let me get the next one ready first. She poured batter into the pan with practiced ease. Mr. Hale, there's coffee in the pot, fresh. Richard poured himself a cup, watching as Naomi guided Ethan through the process of flipping a pancake. She stood behind him, her hands hovering near his, as he gripped the spatula, and when he successfully turned the pancake without dropping it, his whoop of joy echoed through the kitchen. Did you see that, Daddy? Did you see? I saw. That was perfect, buddy. Naomi says practice makes progress, not perfect. But that one was pretty perfect. It really was. Richard took a sip of coffee, savoring the normalcy of the moment. This was what he'd been running from. Not the pain of losing Amanda, but the vulnerability of these small, ordinary moments that somehow meant everything. Mr. Hale, could you set the table? Naomi asked, sliding the finished pancakes onto a plate. Dishes are in. I know where they are. Richard set down his coffee. It's my house, Naomi. I haven't forgotten everything. She flushed slightly. Of course. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. You've been running this house for a month. It makes sense that you'd think I need direction. He pulled plates from the cabinet, then paused. Where does Ethan want to sit? Does he have a specific spot? I sit here. Ethan pointed to the chair he'd claimed last night. That's my spot. And you sit there. And Naomi sits there. The same arrangement as dinner. Richard wondered how long it had been since Ethan had eaten breakfast with him before yesterday. Weeks, months. They settled around the table with stacks of pancakes, butter, and syrup. Ethan immediately drowned his pancakes in syrup, creating a sticky pool on his plate. Easy, sweetheart, Naomi said gently. Remember what we talked about, just enough to taste it. But I like a lot. I know you do, but your tummy doesn't like when you have too much sugar in the morning. Ethan made a face but stopped pouring. Richard made a mental note his son apparently got stomach aches from too much sugar. When had that started? Had it always been that way? So, Richard said, cutting into his own pancakes. What do we usually do on Saturdays? Ethan looked at Naomi, then back at Richard. You're not going to work. Not today. I'm spending the day with you. Really? The whole day? The whole day. Richard smiled. So, what would you like to do? Ethan's face lit up. Can we go to the park? Naomi takes me sometimes, and there's this really cool climbing structure and I can go all the way to the top. Now I can show you. The park sounds perfect. And maybe we can get ice cream after. Naomi says ice cream isn't just for summer. Naomi's right. Ice cream is for whenever you want it. Ethan looked like Christmas had come early. This is the best day ever, and it's not even really started yet. They ate breakfast together, Ethan chattering about everything and nothing, his favorite playground equipment, the kid he'd met last week who had a dog named Pancake, the cloud he'd seen that looked like a dragon. Richard listened to every word, trying to memorize the sound of his son's voice when he was happy, instead of crying. After breakfast, Ethan ran upstairs to get dressed. The moment he was out of earshot, Naomi's expression shifted. Mr. Hale, we need to talk. Richard's stomach tightened. That sounds ominous. It's not ominous, it's practical. She started clearing the table. You told him you'd spend the whole day with him. Do you understand what that means? It means I spend the day with him. I'm not following. Naomi set the plates down with more force than necessary. It means when he needs to use the bathroom at the park, you help him. It means when he gets scared on the climbing structure, you don't just tell him to be brave, you stay close and encourage him. It means when he inevitably spills ice cream on his shirt, you don't get frustrated or annoyed. You just clean it up and move on. I know how to parent my own son. Do you? Her voice was sharp. Because a month ago, you didn't know he was lactose intolerant. You didn't know he has nightmares. You didn't know he can't have too much sugar in the morning. So forgive me for wondering what else you don't know. Richard felt his jaw clench. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Mr. Hale. But we're not talking about fair. We're talking about reality. And the reality is that your son has been waiting his whole life for you to show up the way you promised to last night. If you disappoint him today, I won't. You can't know that. You've been gone for weeks at a time. Being present for one day is very different from being present for 1 hour at bedtime. Then help me. The words came out rougher than Richard intended. Instead of assuming I'm going to fail, help me not to. Teach me what you've learned. Tell me what he needs. Naomi crossed her arms. He needs consistency. He needs to know that when you say you'll do something, you'll follow through. He needs... I'm ready. Ethan bounded back into the kitchen wearing mismatched clothes, a dinosaur shirt with plaid shorts. Can we go now? Richard looked at Naomi, who was studying Ethan's outfit with an expression that suggested this was a battle she'd learned not to fight. Buddy, those clothes don't really match, Richard said carefully. Ethan's face fell. But I like them. This is my favorite shirt and my favorite shorts. I know, but... Mr. Hale. Naomi's voice was quiet, but firm. Is matching clothes worth the argument? Richard looked at his son's worried expression and realized what he was doing. Already trying to control things that didn't matter, already making issues out of non-issues. You're right, he said to Ethan. If those are your favorites, then they're perfect. Ethan's smile returned full force. Can we go now? Please. They loaded into Richard's car, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than most people made in a year. Ethan climbed into his car seat in the back, and when Richard reached to buckle him in, he found himself fumbling with straps that seemed impossibly complicated. It's okay, Daddy. Naomi can show you. Ethan's voice held no judgment, just patience. And so Richard found himself being taught by the woman he employed how to buckle his own son into a car seat. She showed him which straps to adjust, how to make sure it was tight enough to be safe, but not so tight it was uncomfortable, where to check that everything was secure. Thank you, he said quietly. You'll get the hang of it. She stepped back. Have fun at the park. You're not coming? Naomi shook her head. You two need time together. I'll be here when you get back. You promise, Ethan called from the back seat. You promise you'll be here? I promise, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. Richard saw the relief on his son's face and understood. Ethan was still afraid everyone would leave, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. They drove to the park, Ethan providing a running commentary about every landmark they passed. That's the store where Naomi buys the good bread. And that's the coffee shop with the cookies shaped like dinosaurs. And that's where my friend Jack lives. He's got a big dog named Moose. At the park. Ethan exploded out of the car the moment Richard unbuckled him, racing toward the playground equipment with abandon. Richard followed more slowly, watching his son climb with surprising confidence up a structure that looked terrifyingly high. Daddy, watch this! Ethan reached the top and waved frantically. I see you, buddy. That's amazing. Richard's heart was in his throat as Ethan navigated across a rope bridge that swayed with every step. I can do the fast slide now. Naomi says I'm brave enough. He positioned himself at the top of a steep, twisting slide. Watch. Richard watched his son disappear down the slide, emerging at the bottom with windswept hair and the biggest smile. Did you see how fast I went? I saw you were like lightning." Ethan ran back to do it again, and this time when he got to the top he called down, "Come up here, Daddy. You can see everything." Richard eyed the climbing structure dubiously. He was wearing jeans and a casual button-down, not exactly playground attire. But Ethan was looking at him with such hope that Richard found himself climbing up, squeezing through spaces designed for children, until he emerged on the platform next to his son. "See?" Ethan pointed across the park. "You can see all the way to the pond from here. And that's the path where we feed the ducks." Richard looked at the view. Nothing spectacular, just a typical city park, but through Ethan's eyes, it was magical. "This is pretty cool, buddy. I like it up here. Sometimes when I'm sad, I come up here and I think about Mama. Naomi says maybe Mama can see me better from up high." Richard's throat tightened. "That's a nice thought. Do you think she can? Do you think she's watching?" "Yeah, Ethan, I think she is. And I think she's really proud of how brave you are." They sat together on the platform, their legs dangling through the railings, and Richard tried to imagine how many times Ethan had climbed up here alone with Naomi looking for his mother in the clouds. "Daddy, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why did you leave so much after Mama died?" The question was so direct, so painfully honest, that Richard almost deflected, almost gave some sanitized answer about work and responsibility. But Ethan deserved better than that. "Because I was scared," Richard said finally. "Being at home without your mama hurt so much that I couldn't breathe sometimes. Every room reminded me of her. Every dinner felt wrong without her there. And instead of staying and learning how to hurt less, I ran away. I buried myself in work because work doesn't hurt. Work doesn't make you feel things you don't want to feel. But you left me alone, and I was hurting too. I know, buddy, and that was wrong. I thought maybe if I worked hard enough, if I made enough money, if I built enough success, it would somehow make up for losing her. But it doesn't work that way. You can't replace love with money. You can't fill a hole in your heart with achievements." Ethan leaned against Richard's side. "I'm glad you came home." "Me too." Richard put his arm around his son. "I'm sorry it took me so long to figure out what was important. Naomi says sometimes grown-ups forget that feelings are important. She says you have to be brave enough to feel sad before you can feel happy again. Naomi's very wise." "Yeah, she's the best." Ethan looked up at Richard. "Are you going to marry her?" Richard nearly fell off the platform. "What? No, where did that come from?" Jack's mom got married again after his dad left. And now Jack has a new dad and a baby sister. I thought maybe that's what happens. When moms or dads go away, new ones come. "Ethan, no. That's not Naomi works for us. She takes care of you because that's her job. But she loves me. She said so. I know she does. And I'm grateful for that. But loving you doesn't mean she's going to be your new mom." Richard chose his words carefully. Nobody will ever replace your mama. Ever. And Naomi knows that. She's not trying to take Mama's place. She's just being someone who cares about you in her own way. "So you're not going to marry her?" "No, buddy, I'm not." Ethan looked disappointed. "Okay. I just thought maybe if she lived with us forever, she wouldn't have to worry about money anymore. She cries sometimes at night. I heard her on the phone with someone about bills." Richard felt something twist in his chest. "She cries about money." "Sometimes. She tries to be quiet, but I hear her. She talks about her mom being sick and something about loans and not having enough." Ethan picked at the railing. "I wish I could help her. She helps me all the time." Richard made another mental note. He'd offered Naomi a raise, but clearly she was dealing with more financial stress than he'd realized. They'd need to talk about that. Really talk, not just him throwing money at the problem. "Ready to go down the slide?" he asked, changing the subject. "Yeah, race you." Ethan scrambled toward the slide, and Richard followed, feeling ridiculous, but somehow lighter than he had in months. They spent 2 hours at the park, climbing, swinging, running. Richard pushed Ethan on the swings until his arms ached, caught him at the bottom of the slide a dozen times, and even attempted the monkey bars himself, earning a hysterical laugh from his son when he made it exactly 3 bars before dropping. By the time they headed for ice cream, Richard was sweaty and exhausted and happier than he'd been since before Amanda died. The ice cream shop was small and crowded, filled with families and teenagers. Ethan pressed his face against the glass display case, studying the flavors with intense concentration. "Can I have 2 scoops?" "You can have 3 scoops if you want." Ethan's eyes went wide. "Really? Really? Naomi says too much sugar makes me hyper." "Naomi's probably right. How about 2 scoops, and we'll call it a compromise." "Deal." Ethan pointed at his choices. Chocolate and cookie dough. They sat at a small table by the window, Ethan attacking his ice cream with enthusiasm, while Richard opted for simple vanilla. Within 5 minutes, Ethan had ice cream on his nose, his shirt, and somehow in his hair. "How did you get it in your hair?" Richard asked, amused. "I don't know." Ethan giggled. "It just got there." Richard grabbed some napkins and started cleaning him up, and as he wiped ice cream off his son's face, he thought about what Naomi had said. This was the reality of parenting. The messy, sticky, chaotic reality that couldn't be delegated or scheduled or controlled. "Daddy, are you mad?" "What, no? Why would I be mad? Mrs. Chen used to get mad when I made messes. She said I was too wild." Richard's hand stilled. "You're not too wild. You're 6. 6-year-olds make messes. That's normal. Naomi says messes mean you're having fun. She says if nothing ever got messy, that would mean we weren't really living." Naomi's right again. Richard finished wiping Ethan's face. "And for the record, I'm not Mrs. Chen. I don't care about messes. I care about you being happy." Ethan's smile was sticky and beautiful. "I am happy, Daddy. Today is the best day." They finished their ice cream and drove home, Ethan falling asleep in the car seat within minutes. Richard glanced in the rearview mirror at his son's peaceful face and felt his chest tighten with love and regret in equal measure. How many days like this had he missed? How many moments of joy had he traded for conference calls and contract negotiations? When they pulled into the driveway, Naomi was on the front porch pulling weeds from the flower boxes. She looked up as Richard carefully extracted a sleeping Ethan from the car seat. "Good time?" she asked softly. "The best." Richard adjusted Ethan in his arms. "He's out cold." "Let me get the door." Naomi hurried ahead, opening it quietly. Richard carried Ethan upstairs to his room, laying him gently on the bed. The boy stirred slightly but didn't wake. "Should I take off his shoes?" Richard asked, suddenly unsure. "Probably a good idea. And maybe change him into something more comfortable." Naomi pulled out soft pajamas from Ethan's dresser. "He usually naps about an hour, maybe 2. Together they changed Ethan's clothes, working carefully not to wake him. Richard found himself grateful again for Naomi's presence, for the way she knew exactly what to do when he was still fumbling. Once Ethan was settled, they stepped out into the hallway, leaving the door cracked open. "Thank you," Richard said. "For this morning. For the advice." "Did it help?" "More than you know." Richard ran a hand through his hair. "Ethan told me something at the park. About you." Naomi tensed. "What did he say?" "He said he hears you crying at night sometimes. About bills and your mother and loans." Richard kept his voice gentle. "Naomi, I meant what I said about the salary increase. But if you need more help, if you're dealing with debt or medical bills, I can handle my own problems, Mr. Hale." "I'm not suggesting you can't. I'm offering help if you need it." Richard paused. "How sick is your mother?" Naomi's face crumpled slightly before she caught herself. "Stage 4 breast cancer. She finished chemo last month, but the bills are—" She shook her head. "I'm sorry, this isn't your problem." "What if I wanted it to be?" "Why? Because you feel guilty. Because you've been taking care of my son when you're dealing with something this hard yourself. Because you've put his needs above your own. Because—" Richard stopped, searching for the right words. "Because I have resources I'm not using, and you're drowning in debt, trying to save your mother's life. That's not right. Life isn't right, Mr. Hale. Life is just what happens. Let me help, please. Not as charity, as a thank you for everything you've done for Ethan. Naomi wiped her eyes angrily. You can't just throw money at every problem. I'm not throwing money. I'm offering support. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like guilt trying to buy forgiveness. Maybe it is. Maybe I am trying to make up for being a terrible father and a worse employer. Richard met her eyes. But that doesn't change the fact that you need help and I can provide it. Don't let your pride keep you from accepting something that could make your life easier. You don't understand what you're offering. Then explain it to me. Naomi leaned against the wall, exhaustion written in every line of her body. If you pay off my debt, I owe you. If you help with my mom's bills, I owe you. And people who owe wealthy men end up losing pieces of themselves until there's nothing left but obligation. I don't want you to owe me anything. I want you to be able to breathe without drowning in bills you can't pay. Everyone wants something, Mr. Hale. You're right. I do want something. Richard took a breath. I want Ethan to be happy. I want him to have someone in his life who truly cares about him, not because they're paid to, but because they choose to. And I want that someone, you, to not be so stressed about money that you're crying at night. Because when you hurt, Ethan hurts. He hears you. He worries about you. And he's already carrying enough weight for a 6-year-old. Naomi's chin trembled. That's not fair. Nothing about this situation is fair. But we can make it better. Not perfect. Just better. How much debt are we talking about? Richard asked gently. Naomi closed her eyes. $43,000 in student loans. Another $15,000 in medical bills. And my mom's treatment is ongoing. Her medications alone are $2,000 a month, and insurance barely covers half. Richard did the math quickly. $60,000 plus ongoing medical expenses. For most people, that would be insurmountable. For him, it was less than what he'd spent on his watch. Consider it handled. Her eyes snapped open. What? The debt. Consider it handled, and I'll set up a medical fund for your mother's ongoing care. You can't, that's not. I can and I am. We'll draw up paperwork if it makes you feel better. Call it an interest-free loan that you can pay back over time, if you insist, though. I'd rather consider it a signing bonus for agreeing to stay on. Mr. Hale. Richard. If we're going to be doing this raising Ethan together essentially, then you should probably call me Richard. Naomi looked at him like he'd lost his mind. I can't call you Richard. Why not? Because you're my employer. You're living in my house, sleeping down the hall from my son, teaching me how to be a father. I think we're past formal employer-employee relationships, don't you? No, we need boundaries. We need clear lines about what this is. Fine, then tell me what this is. Naomi opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. I don't know. I just know it can't be you calling yourself Richard and paying off my debts and blurring all the lines until I don't know where I stand anymore. You stand as someone important to my son, someone important to this family. Richard kept his voice steady. And if that terrifies you, I understand. But don't reject help because you're scared. Reject it because you actually don't want it. Of course I want it. Do you have any idea what it's like to watch your mother suffer and know you can't afford the treatment that might save her? To choose between your education and her medication? To lie awake at night doing math in your head, trying to figure out which bill you can skip this month so you can eat? Naomi's voice cracked. I want help so badly it physically hurts, but wanting it doesn't mean I should take it from you. Why not me? Because everything comes with strings. Even when people say it doesn't, it does. Then let's put it in writing. Legal contract. No strings, no expectations, no obligation beyond continuing to care for Ethan the way you already do. Richard pulled out his phone. I'll call my lawyer right now. We'll make this official binding and completely separate from your employment. You keep doing your job. I help with your debts. Simple. Nothing about this is simple. No. But it's right. And deep down, You know it is. Naomi stared at him for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. Why are you doing this? Because my son loves you. Because you've given him something I couldn't, security and presence and unconditional care. Because I have money sitting in accounts doing nothing while you're suffering. Richard's voice softened. And because maybe, just maybe, helping you helps me remember what money is actually for. Not hoarding or building empires, but making people's lives better. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Let me help. Let me do this one thing right. Naomi covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. Richard stood there awkwardly, unsure if he should comfort her or give her space. Finally, she lowered her hands. Okay. Okay. Okay, I'll accept your help, but on my terms. Legal contract, everything in writing, and I pay you back. Even if it takes 20 years, I pay you back. If that's what you need. It's what I need. She wiped her face. Thank you. I hate that I have to say thank you for this, but thank you. You don't have to hate it. Just let yourself accept it. From Ethan's room came a small voice. Daddy, Naomi. Where are you? They both moved toward the door. Inside, Ethan was sitting up, his hair sticking up in all directions, looking confused. We're right here, sweetheart, Naomi said gently. Did you have a good nap? Yeah. I dreamed about ice cream. He rubbed his eyes. And about Mama. She was at the park with us. Richard's heart squeezed. Was she? Uh-huh. She was pushing me on the swings, and she told me she's glad you came home. Ethan looked at Richard with those serious blue eyes. She said you were lost for a while, but now you're finding your way back. Richard's vision blurred. She said that, in the dream, yeah. Ethan climbed out of bed and walked to Richard, taking his hand. Are you sad, Daddy? A little bit, but it's a good kind of sad. The kind that means I loved your mama very much. I love her too, even though I don't remember everything. That's okay. We'll remember together. Deal. Deal. Ethan squeezed his hand. Can we have dinner together too? All three of us. Absolutely. What do you want to eat? Naomi's spaghetti. It's the best. Ethan looked at Naomi hopefully. Can we, please? I think we can manage that. Naomi smiled, though her eyes were still wet. Why don't you and your dad go downstairs and I'll start cooking? Can Daddy help? He doesn't know how to make the good sauce. Naomi glanced at Richard. Would you like to learn? I would. Richard felt something settle in his chest. I really would. And so they all went downstairs together. Ethan chattering about his dream. Naomi moving toward the kitchen. Richard following behind, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, the house didn't feel empty. It felt like a home. Like a place where people loved each other, helped each other, and showed up day after day, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Like a place worth staying for. In the kitchen, Naomi pulled out a large pot and set it on the stove, while Ethan dragged a step stool over to the counter. First, we brown the meat, Ethan announced importantly. That's the most important part. Naomi says if you don't brown it right, the whole sauce tastes boring. Richard washed his hands at the sink, watching as Naomi efficiently pulled ingredients from the refrigerator: ground beef, onions, garlic, canned tomatoes, herbs he couldn't identify. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd cooked in this kitchen hundreds of times, while Richard felt like a guest in his own home. Can you dice these? Naomi handed him an onion and a knife. Richard stared at the onion. How small? Small enough to disappear into the sauce. About a 1/4 inch. She demonstrated with a few quick cuts that looked effortless. Like that. Richard began cutting, his movement slow and awkward compared to hers. Ethan watched with fascination. You're not very good at that, Daddy. Nobody, I'm not. But I'm learning. That's what Naomi always says. She says we're all learning all the time. Naomi's very wise. Richard finished the onion, his eyes watering. How's this? Naomi glanced over. Perfect. Now the garlic. They worked together in a rhythm that felt almost choreographed, Naomi directing Richard following instructions, Ethan providing commentary, and occasionally stirring when allowed. The meat sizzled in the pan, filling the kitchen with savory smells that made Richard's stomach growl. "When did you learn to cook like this?" Richard asked, as Naomi added spices to the sauce with the confidence of someone who didn't need to measure. "My grandmother. She said if you couldn't feed yourself, you couldn't take care of anyone else." Naomi stirred the pot gently. "She died when I was 15, but I still use her recipes." This was her recipe. Modified. She would never have used canned tomatoes, everything had to be fresh. But I work with what I have. She glanced at him. "Your kitchen is actually amazing. You have equipment I've only dreamed about using." Richard looked around at the professional-grade appliances, the marble countertops, the imported Italian cookware. "I don't think I've turned on half these things. Your chef probably has." "I fired the chef." Naomi nearly dropped the spoon. "When?" "About 20 minutes ago. I called him while you were getting the groceries ready, told him I wouldn't be needing his services anymore." "Mr. Hale." "Richard, and I meant what I said about learning. If Ethan's going to eat real food made with love instead of catered meals from someone I pay, then I need to learn how to make it." Ethan tugged on Richard's sleeve. "Does that mean Naomi's going to cook forever?" "If she's willing to teach me, yes." "But what if she leaves? What if you mess up and she goes away like everyone else?" The fear in Ethan's voice cut through the domestic warmth like a knife. Naomi knelt down immediately. "Sweetheart, I'm not leaving. Remember our contract? I signed papers. I work here now officially." "But papers don't mean anything if Daddy gets mad, or if you get sad, or if—" "Ethan." Richard knelt too, putting them all at eye level. "Look at me. I'm not going to fire Naomi. And even if something happened and she decided to leave, which I really hope she doesn't, you and I would figure it out together. Because I'm not disappearing again. You're stuck with me." "Promise." "I promise. Cross my heart." Ethan studied Richard's face for a long moment, then turned to Naomi. "And you promise too." "I promise, baby. I'm not going anywhere." "Okay." Ethan's voice was small. "But can we keep making promises every day, just so I remember?" Richard's throat tightened. His son needed daily reassurance that the adults in his life wouldn't abandon him. What had Richard done to this child? "We can make promises every single day if that's what you need," Richard said. They stood up, the moment passing, but leaving its weight behind. The sauce bubbled on the stove, and Naomi turned back to it, stirring with hands that shook slightly. "Can I add the secret ingredient?" Ethan asked, clearly trying to push past his fear. "Of course." Naomi pulled out a small jar. "Just a pinch, remember." Ethan carefully measured out what looked like brown sugar, adding it to the pot with intense concentration. "This makes it taste special, not too sweet, just right." Richard watched them, the easy way they communicated the trust between them. He wanted that, needed that, but he knew it would take time to build what they'd created in just a month. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. "You can answer it," Naomi said quietly. "We've got this under control." "No, whatever it is can wait." But the phone kept buzzing. Finally, Richard pulled it out to silence it and saw the name on the screen. James Thornton, his business partner. 12 missed calls. 15 texts. "Daddy? Is it work?" Richard looked at Ethan's face, saw the fear creeping back in. "Yeah, buddy, but I'm not answering." "But what if it's important? What if they need you?" "You need me more." The phone started ringing again. Richard declined the call, but immediately it started again. "Maybe you should answer," Naomi said. "If they're calling that much, I don't care." "Richard." She used his first name carefully, testing it out. "If something's really wrong and you ignore it, you'll resent being here. Answer it. We'll wait." Richard wanted to argue, but she was right. He stepped out onto the back porch, pressing the answer button with more force than necessary. What? Finally. Richard, we've got a problem. The Tokyo deal is falling apart. Tanaka-san is backing out unless you're on a plane tonight to meet with him personally. Then he backs out. Silence on the other end. Then, excuse me. I said he backs out. I'm not getting on a plane tonight, James. I'm not leaving. This deal is worth $40 million. I don't care if it's worth $400 million. I'm not leaving my son. Your son Richard, what's gotten into you? You've been chasing this deal for 6 months. And I've been abandoning my son for even longer. So Tanaka can wait, or he can walk. I don't care which. You're being irrational. Maybe. But I'm finally being a father. Richard looked through the window at Ethan stirring the sauce under Naomi's guidance. Find another way, James. Offer him video conference. Send someone else. Do whatever you need to do, but I'm staying here. The board is going to hear about this. Let them. I'll deal with it later. Richard. I said no, James. For the first time in my career, I'm saying no to a deal, and it feels pretty damn good. He hung up before James could respond. When Richard walked back into the kitchen, both Naomi and Ethan were staring at him. You really said no. Ethan's voice was awed. I really said no. But Naomi says that deal is really important. I heard you talking about it before you left. It is important, but you're more important, and no amount of money is worth missing dinner with you tonight. Ethan launched himself at Richard, wrapping around his waist. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Richard held him tight, looking over his head at Naomi. She was watching them with tears in her eyes, and something else, respect maybe. Or hope. The sauce is ready, she said softly. We just need to boil the pasta. They set the table together, all three of them moving around each other in the kitchen, like they'd been doing this for years instead of hours. When they finally sat down to eat, Ethan insisted on saying grace, something Richard hadn't done since he was a child. Dear God. Ethan began, his small hands folded earnestly. Thank you for this food, and for Naomi who made it, and for Daddy who stayed home and didn't go to Japan. Please tell Mama we miss her, and please help Naomi's mama get better. Amen. Amen. Naomi and Richard echoed. They ate slowly. Ethan chattering between bites about everything from dinosaurs to space, to why broccoli was actually kind of good if you put cheese on it. Richard listened and laughed, and felt something in his chest unknot for the first time in months. This is really good, he said to Naomi. Seriously, better than anything the chef ever made. That's because it's made with love, Ethan said matter-of-factly. Love makes everything taste better. Where did you learn that? Naomi tells me all the time. She says when you cook for people you love, the food knows, and it tastes different. Richard looked at Naomi. Is that true? She flushed slightly. It's what my grandmother used to say. I don't know if it's scientifically accurate. I don't care if it's scientific. I care that you taught my son that love matters more than technique. After dinner, Ethan wanted to play a board game, something called Candyland, that apparently he and Naomi played often. Richard had never heard of it, but found himself sitting cross-legged on the floor, moving a gingerbread man piece around a colorful board, while Ethan explained rules that seemed to change every 5 minutes. No, Daddy. You can't go there. That's the molasses swamp. The what? You lose a turn if you get stuck. Richard dramatically threw his hands up. Oh no, not the molasses swamp. Ethan giggled, the sound pure and uninhibited. You're silly, Daddy. Yeah, buddy. I guess I am. They played until Ethan started yawning, his movements getting slower and clumsier. When he nearly knocked over the entire board trying to reach his piece, Naomi gently suggested bedtime. But I'm not tired, Ethan protested through another huge yawn. I can see that, Richard said seriously. You're wide awake, completely alert. Exactly. Which is why you just tried to move your piece to the purple square that doesn't actually exist on the board. Ethan looked down, realizing he'd been reaching for empty air. Oh. Bath time, buddy. Then bed. This time, Richard ran the bath without help. He used the right bubble bath, got the temperature perfect on the first try, and even remembered to lay out pajamas before starting the water. Small victories, but they felt enormous. While Ethan splashed in the tub, Naomi appeared in the doorway. "You're getting good at this." "I'm trying. Still feel like I'm faking it half the time." That's parenthood. Everyone's faking it. The trick is to fake it consistently enough that it becomes real. Richard helped Ethan out of the tub, wrapped him in a towel, and carried him to his room. This time, when they read stories, Richard read them in silly voices that made Ethan laugh until he hiccuped. And when it was time for the 3 questions, Richard answered them without hesitation. "Did I make Daddy leave?" "No, never. Not once." "Will Daddy come back?" "I'm already here and I'm staying." "Will you be here in the morning?" "I'll be right here in this bed beside you, just like last night." Ethan snuggled into his covers, satisfied. "Can Naomi sing the song, the one about the night?" Naomi looked at Richard seeking permission. "Please," he said. "I'd like to hear it too." She sat on the edge of the bed and began to sing, her voice soft and clear. It was Amanda's lullaby, the one Richard had heard 1,000 times, but Naomi's version was different. Lower, slower, achingly tender. She sang about a brave knight who went on adventures, faced dragons and storms and dark forests, but always found his way home to the people who loved him. By the time she finished, Ethan was asleep, his breathing deep and even. Richard felt tears on his face and didn't bother to wipe them away. "That was beautiful," he whispered. "She had a lovely voice, your wife. Ethan tried to teach it to me, but he could only remember pieces. I had to fill in the rest." "You did it perfectly. She would have loved that you kept it alive for him." They stepped out into the hallway, leaving Ethan's door cracked open. Richard expected Naomi to excuse herself to retreat to her room like she had the night before. Instead, she hesitated. "Can we talk? Really talk?" "Of course." Living room. They settled on opposite ends of the large sectional sofa, the house quiet around them. Richard realized this was the first time they'd been alone together without Ethan nearby, without the buffer of his presence. "I need to understand what you're expecting from me," Naomi said. "With this arrangement. With the money and the contract and everything." "I'm expecting you to keep doing what you're doing, taking care of Ethan, teaching me how to be better." "But what happens when you decide I'm not needed anymore? What happens when you've learned enough and you want your space back?" Richard leaned forward. "That's not going to happen." "You can't know that." "I can. Because what you give Ethan isn't something I can learn from a manual or figure out on my own. You give him security, love, a female presence in his life that he desperately needs." Richard paused. His mother's been gone almost 2 years. He barely remembers her voice, can't quite picture her face without looking at photos. And he needs... "I'm not his mother, Richard." "I know that. But you're someone who loves him like a mother would. And that matters." "It scares me." "What does?" "How attached he is. How attached I am." Naomi's voice cracked. "I never wanted kids of my own. Raising my siblings was enough. I saw how hard it was, how much it cost my mom emotionally and financially. I was supposed to take this job, save money, help my family, and move on. But now you love him." "Now I love him so much it terrifies me. Because I know how this ends. One day he won't need me anymore. One day you'll find someone to marry someone who'll be his stepmother and I'll be..." "Stop!" Richard moved closer. "You're catastrophizing, creating problems that don't exist." "They will exist, though. Eventually. Maybe. But why waste energy worrying about eventually when right now is what matters?" He caught her gaze. "Right now, Ethan needs you. I need you. And you need, what do you need, Naomi?" She looked away. "I need to know my mom won't die because I can't afford her treatment. I need to stop waking up at 3 in the morning doing math in my head about which bill gets paid and which one gets delayed. I need—" Her voice broke. "I need to stop feeling like I'm drowning all the time." "Then let me help you." "You already offered. And you already accepted. But I don't think you really believe it yet. I don't think you trust that I'm actually going to follow through." "Can you blame me? Every other rich person I've worked for made promises they never kept." "I'm not every other rich person." "Aren't you? You abandoned your son for weeks at a time. You hired people to care for him instead of doing it yourself. You put work above everything else until you almost lost him completely." Naomi's voice was harsh but honest. "Why should I trust that this version of you is the real one, and not just a phase that'll end the moment things get hard?" Richard absorbed the accusation without deflecting. "You're right. About all of it. I've been a terrible father and a worse employer. But that's exactly why I'm trying to change, because I finally understand what I was losing." "Understanding isn't the same as changing." "I know. Which is why I'm asking you to give me time to prove it. Not to believe me now, but to watch what I do and decide based on that." "Why?" Naomi pulled her knees up to her chest, making herself smaller. "My mom asked me yesterday if I loved Ethan." "What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth, that I loved him more than I thought possible to love someone else's child. And she said that was dangerous, that loving children who aren't yours only leads to heartbreak." "Your mom's wrong." "Is she? Because I feel like I'm setting myself up for disaster. What happens when you decide to—" Richard's phone rang again. James. Again. "I need to take this, just to end it permanently." He answered. "James. Don't hang up, just listen. Tanaka agreed to video conference, 9 a.m. Monday morning. That's the best I could do." "Fine. Schedule it." "But Richard, he wants guarantees. He wants to know you're committed." "I'm committed to my son. The business will have to work around that from now on." "The board." "I'll talk to the board, Monday, after the Tanaka call. Tell them I'm calling an emergency meeting." "What are you going to tell them?" "That things are changing. That I'm not the man I was a month ago, and they can either accept that or replace me." Richard looked at Naomi while he talked. "Because I've finally figured out what actually matters in life, and it's not profit margins or stock prices or empire building." He hung up before James could respond. "You're going to lose your company," Naomi said softly. "Maybe, but I won't lose my son. And right now, that's the only math that matters." "You say that now, but when reality hits, then I deal with reality. But I do it from here, from this house with Ethan sleeping down the hall, and you helping me figure out how not to screw it up." Richard held her gaze. "I can't promise I'll be perfect. I can't promise I won't make mistakes. But I can promise I'll show up. Every day. Even when it's hard. Even when work is calling or deals are falling apart or the whole world is demanding my attention. I'll show up for him." "And what about showing up for you?" The question surprised him. "What? You've been running from grief for 2 years. Avoiding this house, avoiding your son, avoiding anything that reminded you of your wife. But you can't outrun pain forever. Eventually, you have to stop and feel it." "I am feeling it. Every day. Every time I look at Ethan and see Amanda's eyes." "But are you letting yourself grieve? Or are you just substituting one distraction for another, replacing work with hyper-parenting?" Richard felt the truth of that land heavy in his chest. "I don't know how to grieve. I never learned." "Then learn. The same way you're learning to cook and give baths and read bedtime stories. Let yourself feel sad without running from it." "That sounds terrifying." "It is. But it's also the only way through." Naomi's voice was gentle. "You can't heal what you won't acknowledge." "How did you get so wise?" "Therapy. Lots of therapy. After my dad left and my mom got sick, I had to learn how to process pain without drowning in it." She smiled sadly. "It's not easy, but it's necessary." "Will you teach me?" Not just how to parent, but how to grieve. I'm not a therapist, Richard. But you understand it in a way I don't. And I trust you more than I'd trust some stranger with a degree. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. Okay, but only if you promise something. What? That you'll actually do the work. Not just listen and nod and then ignore everything I say. That you'll really try. I promise. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of the conversation settling around them. Finally, Naomi stood. I should get to bed. Tomorrow's Sunday. Ethan always wants pancakes on Sundays. Wait, before you go, the contract. The money. When can we make that official? Your lawyer will probably need a few days to draw up the paperwork. He'll have it done by Monday. I'll make sure of it. Richard stood too. And Naomi. Thank you for staying, for loving my son, for being brave enough to tell me hard truths. Thank you for listening. Most men in your position wouldn't. I'm trying not to be most men anymore. She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. I can see that. And for what it's worth, I think Amanda would be proud of you right now. The words hit Richard like a physical blow. You think so? I know so. Because Ethan told me once that his mama always said the bravest thing a person could do was admit they were wrong and try to do better. And that's exactly what you're doing. After Naomi went to bed, Richard stood alone in the quiet house. For the first time in 2 years, he let himself really think about Amanda. Not the sanitized memories he'd allowed himself during business trips, but the real messy, beautiful truth of who she'd been. She would have hated what he'd become, hated the way he'd abandoned Ethan, hated the way he'd let grief turn him cold and distant. But she also would have believed he could change, would have told him it wasn't too late to be the father Ethan deserved. Richard walked upstairs and opened Ethan's door. His son was sprawled across the bed, one arm flung out, completely relaxed in sleep. Richard sat in the chair by the bed watching Ethan breathe and finally let himself cry. Really cry. Not the controlled tears of earlier, but deep wrenching sobs for everything he'd lost and everything he'd almost thrown away. He cried for Amanda, for the life they should have had, for all the ways he'd failed to honor her memory. He cried for Ethan, for the lonely nights and unanswered questions and fear of abandonment. He cried for himself, for the man he'd become, and the long road ahead to become someone better. And when he was done crying, when the tears finally stopped and his breathing evened out, Richard felt lighter. Not fixed, not healed, but lighter. Like maybe grief was a weight you learned to carry, rather than a burden you had to escape. I'm sorry, Amanda, he whispered into the darkness. I'm sorry for everything. But I'm trying now. I'm really trying. In his sleep, Ethan stirred and mumbled something that sounded like, Mama. Richard moved to the bed and carefully climbed in beside his son, pulling him close. Ethan snuggled against him, instinctively seeking warmth and comfort. I've got you, buddy, Richard whispered. I've got you, and I'm not letting go. For the second night in a row, Richard fell asleep in his son's bed, but this time he wasn't running from anything. He was finally standing still, long enough to figure out where he actually belonged. And the answer was right here, all along. Sunday morning arrived with Ethan's excited whisper in Richard's ear. Daddy, it's pancake day, wake up. Richard opened his eyes to find his son's face hovering inches away, those blue eyes sparkling with anticipation. Every muscle in Richard's body ached from another night in a child-sized bed, but he couldn't remember the last time he'd woken up feeling this content. Pancake day, huh? That's pretty serious business. The most serious, Naomi makes them special on Sundays with chocolate chips and bananas, and sometimes, if we're really lucky, whipped cream. Sounds like I've been missing out. You have? Come on. Ethan tugged at Richard's hand, pulling him out of bed. Downstairs, Naomi was already in the kitchen, her hair still damp from a shower, humming the same song she'd sung the night before. She looked up when they entered, a smile crossing her face. "Good morning. I heard someone's excited about pancakes." "I told Daddy about the special ones." Ethan climbed onto his step stool. "Can I crack the eggs today?" "You can crack 2 eggs. Your dad can crack the rest." Richard moved to the sink to wash his hands, watching in the window's reflection as Ethan carefully selected his eggs from the carton. The domesticity of it all should have felt strange, but instead, it felt right. Like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. "How many people am I feeding?" Naomi asked, pulling out the mixing bowl. 3, Richard said firmly. "You're eating with us. That's not negotiable." She looked like she wanted to argue, but nodded instead. "Okay, 3 it is." They fell into an easy rhythm, Naomi mixing batter, Ethan adding chocolate chips with intense concentration, Richard setting the table and pouring orange juice. When the first pancakes hit the griddle, the smell filled the entire kitchen. "These are going to be perfect," Ethan announced. "I can tell by the smell." "How can you tell by the smell?" Richard asked, amused. "I just know. It's a special skill." Ethan puffed out his chest. "Naomi says I have a good nose." "You do have a good nose," Naomi confirmed, flipping a pancake with expert precision. "You always know when something's burning before I do." They ate breakfast with the Sunday paper spread across the table, Ethan pointing out comics and asking Richard to read them in funny voices. Naomi laughed at Richard's terrible attempts at cartoon character voices, and Ethan laughed even harder, and for a brief, perfect moment, they felt like a real family. Then Richard's phone rang. The board chairman. The laughter died. Ethan's smile faded. Naomi's hand tightened around her coffee cup. "I'm sorry," Richard said, standing. "I have to take this." "You said you weren't leaving." Ethan's voice pitched high with panic. "I'm not leaving. I'm just stepping into the other room for 5 minutes, that's all. 5 minutes. Richard held up his hand, fingers spread. "Count to 300 and I'll be back. I promise." He answered the call in his study, keeping one eye on the kitchen, where he could see Ethan counting anxiously on his fingers. "Richard, what the hell is going on?" The chairman's voice was sharp. "James called me last night saying you've lost your mind." "I haven't lost my mind. I've found my priorities." "Your priorities? You're throwing away a $40 million deal." "I'm not throwing it away. I'm handling it differently. Video conference tomorrow morning." Tanaka agreed. "That's not the point. The point is, you're unreliable now. The board is concerned." "Then tell the board I'll address their concerns at the emergency meeting tomorrow. But I'm done apologizing for putting my son first." Richard watched Ethan through the doorway, still counting. "I've spent 2 years building an empire while my family fell apart. That stops now. You're going to regret this. The only thing I regret is not doing it sooner." Richard ended the call and walked back into the kitchen. 298, 299? 300? Ethan looked up, relief flooding his face. "You came back." "I said I would, didn't I?" "Was it bad news?" Naomi asked quietly. "Depends on your perspective. The board thinks I'm crazy. But since when has that been a bad thing?" Richard sat back down and took a deliberately large bite of pancake. "These really are the best pancakes I've ever had." Ethan relaxed visibly, his shoulders dropping from around his ears. "Can we go to church? Naomi takes me sometimes, and I like it. They have songs, and Pastor Mike tells really good stories." Richard hadn't been to church since Amanda's funeral. The thought of walking into that building, sitting in those pews, made his chest tight. "Sweetheart, your dad might not want—" Naomi started. "I'll go," Richard interrupted. "If that's what you want to do, buddy, we'll go." An hour later, they were sitting in the third row of a small community church, Ethan squeezed between Richard and Naomi. The pastor, a man in his 60s with kind eyes and a warm smile, welcomed them personally. "Richard Hale, I haven't seen you since, well, it's good to have you back." "It's good to be back, Pastor Mike." Ethan tugged Richard's sleeve during the service, whispering explanations about the hymns and the rituals, clearly proud to be the expert for once. When Pastor Mike began his sermon about forgiveness and second chances, Richard felt like every word was aimed directly at him. "We all make mistakes," the pastor said, his voice carrying through the small sanctuary. "We all lose our way sometimes. But God's love isn't about perfection, it's about showing up. It's about trying again. It's about having the courage to say, 'I was wrong,' and mean it." Richard felt Naomi's eyes on him, but kept his gaze forward. Ethan's small hand found his squeezing tight. After the service, as they filed out, several congregation members stopped them. An elderly woman took Richard's hand in both of hers. "Your wife was a treasure. We miss her dearly." "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. I miss her too." "And this must be the young woman Ethan talks about constantly." Mrs. Patterson turned to Naomi with a knowing smile. "The one who makes the special eggs and knows all the bedtime stories." Naomi flushed. "I'm just the I work for the family." "Your family, dear. Anyone can see that." Mrs. Patterson patted her hand. "Children don't lie about who matters to them." In the car on the way home, Ethan fell asleep in his car seat, exhausted from the morning's activities. Richard glanced at Naomi in the passenger seat. "Are you okay?" "People are going to talk," she said quietly. "About me. About us. About what it looks like. Let them talk." "Easy for you to say. You're not a young black woman living in a wealthy white man's house taking care of his child." Richard's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I didn't think about that. About how it might look to others." "Of course you didn't. You don't have to think about things like that." "You're right. I'm sorry. What can I do differently?" Naomi was quiet for a moment. "Nothing. There's nothing you can do about other people's assumptions. I just needed to say it out loud, to acknowledge that this situation we're in, it's complicated in ways that go beyond just family dynamics." "Do you want to stop the arrangement, I mean? If it's going to cause problems for you?" "No. Ethan needs consistency, and honestly, I need this job. I just wish the world was simpler." "Me too." When they got home, Richard carried a sleeping Ethan upstairs and laid him on his bed for a nap. Coming back down, he found Naomi in the kitchen staring at her phone with tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong?" She looked up startled and quickly wiped her eyes. "Nothing, it's fine." "Naomi, my mom's scan came back. The cancer spread to her liver." Her voice broke. "They're saying 6 months, maybe less." Richard crossed the kitchen without thinking and pulled her into a hug. She stiffened at first, then collapsed against him, sobbing into his shoulder. "I'm so sorry," he murmured. "God, Naomi, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do. I can't lose her. I can't, she's all I have." "That's not true. You have Ethan. You have me. You have people who care about you. It's not the same." She pulled back, wiping her face angrily. "You don't understand. She's my mom. She's the only one who's been there my entire life through everything. And now I'm going to watch her die, and there's nothing I can do about it." "Where is she?" "What hospital?" "St. Mary's, about 2 hours north." "Can she be moved? Transferred somewhere closer?" "Why would that matter?" "Because you shouldn't have to choose between being with her and taking care of Ethan. We can get her moved to a hospital here somewhere with better facilities. I know doctors, specialists. You can't just throw money at cancer and make it disappear." "No, but I can make sure she's comfortable, and you get to spend as much time with her as possible without sacrificing your job or your life." Richard held her gaze. "Please, let me help. Let me do this one thing." Naomi's face crumpled. "Why are you being so nice to me?" "Because you've been nice to my son when you had no reason to be. Because you're a good person dealing with impossible situations. Because—" Richard stopped, surprised by what he almost said. "Because you matter. To Ethan and to me." She stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for something. Okay, help me transfer her. But I'm paying you back for all of it. We'll discuss that later. Right now, let's just focus on getting her moved. He pulled out his phone. I'll call my lawyer. We'll expedite the contract, get you that signing bonus immediately so you have cash flow. And I'll have my assistant coordinate the hospital transfer. Your assistant is probably furious with you for ignoring all those calls. My assistant is paid very well to be furious when necessary. She'll survive. While Richard made calls, Naomi sat at the kitchen table. Her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she wasn't drinking. When he finally hung up, she looked at him with exhausted gratitude. Your lawyer can meet us tomorrow at 10, before your video conference with Tanaka. Good. We'll get the papers signed, get you that money, and then we'll tackle the hospital transfer. You're going to lose your company over this, over me and Ethan and all these distractions. Then I lose it. Some things are worth more than a company. You say that now. I mean it, Naomi. I've been the guy who chose business over everything else. I know exactly where that road leads, and I'm not going back there. Not for $40 million, not for the board's approval, not for anything. She set down her mug carefully. Amanda was lucky to have you. Before everything fell apart, I mean. When you were still the man she married. I wasn't this man when she was alive. I was always working, always chasing the next deal. She used to beg me to take vacations to spend weekends at home to just be present. Richard's voice roughened. She died thinking I valued my career more than my family. And the worst part is, she was right. But you're changing now. Only because I finally hit rock bottom. Only because I almost lost Ethan completely. That's not noble, Naomi. That's just survival. Maybe, but it's still change, and change is hard no matter why you do it. Ethan's voice drifted down from upstairs. Daddy, where are you? Right here, buddy. We're in the kitchen. Small feet thundered down the stairs, and then Ethan appeared, his hair sticking up at odd angles. I had a bad dream. You were gone again. Richard knelt immediately, pulling Ethan close. I'm right here, still here, always here. Promise? Promise. Ethan nodded against Richard's shoulder, then pulled back. Why is Naomi crying? Did something bad happen? Naomi wiped her face quickly. My mama's sick, sweetheart, that's all. I'm just worried about her. Can't the doctors make her better? They're trying. But sometimes people get sick in ways that are hard to fix. Ethan's face scrunched up in thought. Is she going to die like my mama did? The blunt question hung in the air. Naomi's breath caught. Maybe, Richard said gently, because Ethan deserved honesty. We don't know yet, but we're going to help her as much as we can. Can I make her a card? When Naomi gets sad, I make her cards, and it helps a little bit. I think that's a wonderful idea, buddy. Ethan ran off to get his art supplies, leaving Richard and Naomi alone again. He's such a good kid, Naomi whispered. Because of you. Because you taught him that love means showing up when things are hard. They spent the afternoon making cards, Ethan with his crayons and stickers, Richard attempting to fold paper cranes from a YouTube tutorial, Naomi just watching them both with a sad smile. By dinner time, they had a collection of handmade gifts that would have made any grandmother cry. That night, after Ethan was asleep, Richard and Naomi sat in the living room, going over the contract his lawyer had drafted. This is too much, Naomi said, staring at the numbers. This signing bonus is enough to pay off your debts and give you breathing room. That's what we agreed to. But $50,000. Considering what you've done for my son, it's not nearly enough. Take it, Naomi. Please, let yourself stop drowning for 5 minutes. She signed the papers with shaking hands, and Richard watched her shoulders drop as the weight she'd been carrying for years finally lifted. I don't know how to thank you. You already have. Every day you show up for Ethan, you're thanking me. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Richard woke at 5 a.m. unable to sleep and found Naomi already in the kitchen making coffee. Couldn't sleep either, he asked. Too much on my mind. You're meeting with Tanaka, the board. My mom's transfer the hospital called, they can take her this afternoon. Good. That's good news. They drank coffee in companionable silence until Ethan stumbled downstairs dragging his stuffed dinosaur. It's too early, he complained. I know, buddy. But Daddy has important work stuff this morning. We need to do it before you go to school. Can I watch? I promise I'll be quiet. Richard looked at Naomi, who shrugged. Might be good for him to see what you actually do. So at 9 a.m., sharp, Richard sat in his study with his laptop open. Ethan perched on his lap while Naomi hovered in the doorway. The video call connected, and Tanaka's face appeared on screen. Mr. Hale, I understand circumstances have changed. They have. But I'm still committed to this partnership, Tanaka-san. I'm just approaching it differently now. Who is this? Tanaka gestured at Ethan. This is my son Ethan. He wanted to see what Daddy does for work. Tanaka's stern expression softened slightly. Hello, Ethan. Hi. Ethan waved shyly. My daddy makes really important deals, but he's staying home now because I need him. Is that so? Yeah. He used to leave all the time, but now he knows that being a daddy is more important than making money. Richard felt his face flush, but Tanaka was smiling now. Your son is wise, Mr. Hale. Perhaps we all need reminders about what truly matters. He leaned forward. Tell me about this new approach. How do you plan to manage the Tokyo office without relocating? They talked for an hour, working through details with Ethan occasionally asking questions that forced Richard to explain complex business concepts in simple terms. By the end, they had a framework that satisfied both parties. I appreciate your honesty, Mr. Hale, Tanaka said before disconnecting. Your son is lucky to have a father willing to change. After the call ended, Ethan looked up at Richard with pride. You did good, Daddy, even though you couldn't go to Japan. Thanks, buddy. That means a lot. The board meeting at 2 p.m. was less pleasant. Richard sat in his home office, surrounded by hostile faces on his screen. This is unacceptable, the chairman said. You're jeopardizing the entire company for personal reasons. I'm protecting my family. That's not a personal reason, that's a fundamental one. We need a CEO who's fully committed. I am fully committed. I'm just committed to more than one thing now. Richard's voice was steady. For 2 years I gave you everything. Every hour, every holiday, every moment. And you know what? The company did great. But my son almost died inside from neglect. So yes, things are changing. I'll work from home when possible. I'll travel when absolutely necessary. And I'll delegate more to the capable people I've hired. If that's not enough for you, then maybe I'm not the right CEO anymore. The silence was deafening. Are you resigning? Someone asked. Not unless you fire me. I built this company from nothing. I'm not walking away, but I am setting boundaries. So you all need to decide. Do you want me as a part-time CEO who actually has a life? Or do you want to start a search for someone new? More silence. Then the chairman spoke. We'll need to discuss this privately and vote. Take your time. I'll be here, actually being present for my son. Richard ended the call without waiting for a response. Naomi was standing in the doorway. That was either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. Richard laughed, feeling lighter than he had in years. But it felt good. Really good. What if they fire you? Then I find something else, something that actually allows me to be human. He stood up. How's the hospital transfer going? They're moving her now. She should be settled by tonight. Good. Then let's pick Ethan up from school and go visit her. Naomi's eyes widened. You don't have to. I want to. Ethan made those cards and he should deliver them himself. Plus your mom should meet the kid who talks about you constantly. At the hospital that evening, Naomi's mother looked frail in the bed tubes and monitors surrounding her, but her eyes lit up when she saw her daughter. Baby girl. Hi, Mama. Naomi moved to her side, taking her hand. "How are you feeling?" "Better now that you're here. And who's this?" She looked at Ethan, who was hiding partially behind Richard. "This is Ethan, the little boy I've been telling you about." Ethan stepped forward, holding out his stack of cards. "I made you these, to help you feel better. They don't fix sick, but Naomi says they fix sad sometimes." Naomi's mother took the cards with trembling hands, tears already streaming down her face. "These are beautiful, sweetheart. Thank you." "And this is Mr. Hale," Naomi said. "Ethan's father. Call me Richard, please." He shook her hand gently. "Your daughter has been a miracle for my family. I wanted to thank you for raising someone so remarkable." "She's always been special, my Naomi." The older woman looked between them, something knowing in her expression. "She talks about you both in every phone call. Ethan this, Richard that. You've become her family." "Mama." "It's true, baby. And I'm glad. I worried about you being alone when I'm gone. But you're not alone, are you?" "No," Naomi whispered. "I'm not alone." They stayed for an hour, Ethan entertaining Naomi's mother with stories about dinosaurs and pancakes, and his daddy learning to cook. By the time they left, the older woman was smiling despite her pain. In the car, Ethan announced, "I like Naomi's mama. She's nice." "She is nice, buddy." "I'm glad Daddy helped move her. That was a good thing to do." Richard caught Naomi's eye in the rearview mirror. She was crying silently, but she was smiling too. That night, after Ethan was asleep, Richard got the call from the board. They'd voted to keep him as CEO with adjusted expectations. He'd need to maintain quarterly profits and attend board meetings remotely when possible, but they'd agreed to his terms. "We're not happy about this," the chairman said, "but we recognize that you're still the best person for the job." "Thank you. You won't regret it." "We better not." When Richard told Naomi, she actually laughed. "You did it. You actually pulled it off. We did it. You, me, and Ethan. We figured out how to build something real. It's not perfect. No, but it's ours. And that's better than perfect." 3 weeks later, they established a routine. Richard worked from home most days, taking calls from his study, while Ethan played nearby. Naomi split her time between caring for Ethan and visiting her mother. They cooked dinner together every night, all three of them working in the kitchen like a well-oiled machine. Ethan stopped asking the 3 questions. He stopped counting to 300 when Richard took phone calls. He stopped flinching when he heard the word work. And slowly, carefully, Richard started to heal. He talked about Amanda more, not just the perfect memories, but the real ones. The fights they'd had, the dreams they'd shared, the regrets he carried. Naomi listened without judgment, and sometimes she'd share her own stories about loss and grief. One night, 2 months after Richard had come home, Ethan was drawing at the kitchen table while Richard and Naomi cleaned up from dinner. "Naomi," Ethan said suddenly, "can I call you something different?" "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "I want to call you a special name. Not Naomi. Something that means you're important." Naomi's hands stilled in the soapy water. "What kind of name?" Ethan bit his lip, thinking hard. "I don't know. Not Mom, because that's Mama's name, and nobody else gets to be that. But something that means your family." "What about Nomi?" Richard suggested gently. "Like a nickname." Ethan's face lit up. "Nomi, that's perfect. Can I call you Nomi?" Naomi turned from the sink, tears streaming down her face. "Of course you can. I'd be honored." "Then you're Nomi now. My special Nomi, who makes the best eggs and knows all the stories and helps Daddy not be sad anymore." Later that night, after Ethan was asleep, Richard found Naomi on the back porch, looking up at the stars. "You okay?" "He gave me a name, a family name." She wiped her eyes. "I didn't expect that to hit me so hard." "You love him." "I love him so much it scares me. What if I'm not enough? What if he needs more than I can give? Then we figure it out together. That's what families do." Naomi looked at him. Really looked at him. "Are we a family, Richard?" "Really?" I think we have been for a while. We just didn't have words for it yet. What about when you meet someone? When you want to date again? Get married? Where do I fit then? I don't know, but we'll figure it out when we get there. Right now this is working. You, me, Ethan, we work. It's unconventional. The best things usually are. 4 months after Richard came home, Naomi's mother passed away peacefully in her sleep. Naomi was devastated, but not destroyed, held up by Richard and Ethan, who surrounded her with the same love she'd given them. At the funeral, Ethan held Naomi's hand and whispered, "It's okay to be sad. Daddy says being sad means you loved somebody a lot." "Your daddy's right," Naomi whispered back. After the service, as they walked to the car, Ethan looked up at both of them. "We're still a family, right? Even though Naomi's mama went to heaven." "We're still a family," Richard confirmed. "Good, because I don't want anything to change." "Some things will change, buddy. That's part of life. But the important stuff, the love and the showing up and the being there for each other, that stays the same." 6 months after Richard walked into his kitchen and found his son sobbing into Naomi's apron, they had a new normal. Richard ran his company remotely, traveling only when absolutely necessary, and always bringing Ethan with him. Naomi officially became Ethan's nanny and Richard's household manager, with a salary that reflected her actual value and enough benefits to never worry about medical bills again. They weren't a traditional family, but they were family nonetheless, 3 people who'd found each other when they all needed it most, who'd learned that love wasn't about perfection or convention, but about showing up day after day and choosing each other over and over again. One Sunday morning, while making pancakes, Ethan asked, "Daddy, do you think Mama knows about Naomi?" Richard looked at Naomi, who was watching him carefully. "Yeah, buddy, I think she does. And I think she's really happy that we found someone so special to love us." "Do you love Naomi, Daddy?" The question hung in the air. Richard's eyes met Naomi's across the kitchen. "I love what she's brought to our family. I love how she takes care of you. I love—" He stopped, choosing his words carefully. "I love having her in our lives." It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't romance. But it was truth, and for now, truth was enough. "Good," Ethan said, satisfied. "Because I love her a lot, and it would be weird if you didn't love her at all." Naomi laughed, the sound bright and real. "I love you too, sweetheart. Both of you." They ate breakfast together, the Sunday paper spread across the table, sunlight streaming through the windows. It wasn't the life any of them had planned, but it was the life they'd built together, piece by piece, day by day, choice by choice. Richard reached across the table and squeezed Naomi's hand. She squeezed back, understanding passing between them without words. They'd been broken people when they found each other. A father drowning in grief. A young woman crushed by responsibility. A little boy desperate for love. But together, they'd created something neither perfect nor simple, but undeniably real. A family built not on blood or marriage or convention, but on the radical act of showing up for each other when it mattered most. And in the end, that was the only thing that had ever really mattered at all.